A Navy SEAL followed his dog into a blizzard and found proof his dead brother had been alive for 45 years. A Navy SEAL and his dog found a stone hut in a blizzard. Inside was a secret kept for 45 years. Jack Callahan thought Blackstone Ridge had taken his brother when he was 13. Then Titan led him through a deadly whiteout to a warm stone hut that didn't exist on any map. Inside was a photograph, a hidden recording, and a truth powerful men had spent decades trying to bury. Before we begin, comment 1 if you're watching with us, or 0 if you're new, and tell us what city or state you're watching from. The first snow of December had been falling over Pine Hollow since before daylight. Soft at first, then steady enough to erase the tire tracks leading up to the Callahan ranch. Jack Callahan stood alone in his father's study, with one hand resting on the back of an old oak chair. At 58, Jack still carried himself like the man the Navy had trained him to be. His shoulders were square. His movements were economical. He noticed doors, windows, reflections, shadows. Habits learned over decades did not disappear simply because the uniform did. But the room made him feel 13 years old again. Walter Callahan had been buried 6 days earlier. The funeral had been small: ranchers, county men, a retired sheriff, 2 people from the livestock commission Walter had once chaired. They had spoken of him as dependable, disciplined, stubborn, and honest. Jack had listened without correcting anybody. Now he had the job of sorting through what was left. Outside the study window, the ranch stretched toward the foothills in long white fields broken by dark fence lines. Beyond them, far to the west, the Absaroka Range disappeared behind low clouds. Titan lay near the doorway. The 9-year-old Belgian Malinois had been asleep, or close enough to it, but one ear remained angled toward Jack. That was Titan. Even retired, he never truly switched off. Jack pulled open another drawer. Tax records, old cattle invoices, a stack of Christmas cards Walter had never answered. Nothing worth keeping. He closed it. Could have made this easier on me, Dad. Titan lifted his head. Jack glanced at him. I'm talking to a dead man again. Titan's tail tapped once against the floor. Jack almost smiled. Yeah, I know. He crossed to the tall bookcase behind Walter's desk. The shelves were filled with livestock manuals, county reports, Western histories, and several leather-bound books Jack could not remember ever seeing his father read. Walter had built this room the same way he had built his life. Everything in its place. Nothing explained. Jack removed 3 books at a time and stacked them in a cardboard box. Halfway down the second shelf, something felt wrong. He stopped. The back panel behind the books looked normal, but there was a faint difference in the wood grain near one corner. Jack leaned closer, a seam, small enough that most people would have missed it. Jack ran his thumb along the edge. Titan stood. The sound was barely audible, just claws shifting against hardwood. But Jack noticed. You see it too? He pressed the panel, nothing. Then he slid his fingers beneath the shelf and found a recessed metal catch. A click. The wooden panel loosened. Jack's expression changed. Walter had hidden things from people his entire life, but Jack had never known him to build secret compartments. He pulled the panel away. Behind it sat an old green ammunition box. No label, no lock. A thin layer of dust covered the lid. Jack stared at it for several seconds. Titan walked closer, nose working. Back. The dog stopped immediately. Jack reached inside and lifted out the box. It was heavier than expected. He set it on Walter's desk. For reasons he could not explain, the room suddenly felt colder. Jack rested both hands on the metal lid. His pulse had increased. He disliked that. A racing heart belonged to danger, exertion, or memory. Not an ammunition box in a dead man's study. He opened it. At first, he saw only folded canvas. Under that was a brass compass, scratched and dull with age, then several envelopes, a mountain map, and something silver. Jack reached for the metal object. The instant his fingers touched it, he stopped breathing. It was a dog tag, old military style, not army issue, not official, just the kind of stamped identification tag boys sometimes ordered from surplus shops decades ago. The letters were worn, but still readable. Ethan Callahan. Jack sat down. Totten came closer without being called. Jack turned the tag over in his fingers. There was a shallow dent near one edge. He remembered that dent. Ethan had made it with a hammer when he was 16. He had been trying to stamp his own blood type onto the back and missed. Jack had laughed so hard Ethan chased him halfway across the pasture. For one sharp second, the study disappeared. Jack saw summer grass, an old red barn. Ethan running after him with that ridiculous tag bouncing against his chest. Then winter returned. February 1981. Men on snowmobiles, his mother crying into both hands at the kitchen table. Walter standing near the stove with ice frozen into his coat. And one sentence Jack had heard so many times it became part of his bones. The mountain took him. Jack closed his fist around the tag. Titan approached and pressed his nose against Jack's hand. Jack opened his fingers. Titan smelled the metal carefully. Once, then again, more intently. His ears came forward. "What is it?" Titan scented Jack's palm, the tag, then the air around the desk. He moved toward the study door, stopped, looked back. Jack frowned. No, Titan remained still. Jack picked up the tag again. "You never met him." Titan could not possibly recognize Ethan's scent after 45 years. Whatever remained on the metal would have been buried beneath decades of dust, handling, rust, and storage. Still, Titan's behavior bothered him. Jack set the tag on the desk and unfolded the map. It was an old United States Geological Survey sheet of the Blackstone Ridge area. The paper had yellowed at the folds. Several routes were marked in pencil. One trail started north of Pine Hollow, crossed Blackstone Creek, climbed through old timber country, and continued toward the higher ridge. Jack knew most roads in this county. He had repaired fencing on half of them. He had hunted elk along Blackstone Creek. He had never seen this trail. Walter's handwriting ran beside it in several places. Distances, elevation numbers, 2 circles. At the upper edge of the map was a black X. Jack felt pressure building beneath his ribs. Not fear, not yet. He put the map down and searched the ammunition box again. Beneath the canvas was one final envelope. His name was written across it. Jack. Nothing else. The handwriting was Walter's. Jack stared at it. His father had been 84 when he died. In his final months, his hands had shaken badly enough that drinking coffee without spilling it had become difficult. But this handwriting was firm. Older, perhaps, written years before the illness. Jack slid one finger beneath the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper, one sentence, no greeting, no apology, no explanation. Jack read it once, then again. "Your brother did not die where I told you he did." The clock on Walter's wall ticked. Titan breathed quietly beside him. Somewhere downstairs, an old furnace switched on. Jack heard all of it with unnatural clarity. He stood so quickly that the chair scraped backward. No. Titan's ears flattened slightly. Jack read the sentence again. "Your brother did not die where I told you he did." What the hell does that mean? He turned the paper over. Blank. He checked the envelope. Nothing. Jack felt anger arrive before hope could. That was easier. Anger had edges. Anger could be controlled. Hope was dangerous. Walter had been failing near the end. There had been medication, confusion, nights when he called Jack by Ethan's name. Maybe this was nothing more than an old man's guilt, turning memory into fiction. Except the letter had not been written recently, and Walter had hidden it behind a wall, along with Ethan's dog tag, along with a map Jack had never seen. He walked toward the window. Blackstone Ridge was hidden behind falling snow. 45 years. The Malinois sniffed it again, then looked toward the ranch door. Jack studied him. What do you want me to do? Follow a 45-year-old smell? Titan's stare did not change. Jack exhaled. You'd probably try. He picked up the map and spread it under Walter's desk lamp. Now he studied it the way he would once have studied an operational chart, not emotionally, methodically. Terrain first. The penciled route crossed Blackstone Creek at a narrow point about 8 miles northwest of the old logging road. Then it climbed steadily toward a saddle below Blackstone Ridge. Walter had marked distances at several intervals. That meant he had traveled it, probably more than once. Jack pulled his phone from his pocket and opened a modern county topographic map. He enlarged the same area, logging road, creek, forest boundary, nothing beyond that. He checked another map. Same result. Jack shifted the old paper beneath the light. The trail was too deliberate to be imaginary. There were switchbacks, water crossings, elevation marks. Walter had even noted an old wooden bridge. Jack opened the bottom drawer of the desk where Walter kept county maps. He found one dated 1979. His pulse jumped. There it was, a thin road running exactly where Walter's hand-drawn route began. Jack placed the newer county map beside it. On the modern map, the road did not exist. He pulled another. Gone. Jack sat very still. Ethan disappeared in 1981. Sometime between 1979 and 1984, an entire access road had vanished from official county maps. Not closed, not marked abandoned, removed. Jack looked again at Walter's sentence. Your brother did not die where I told you he did. The anger inside him changed shape, became something colder. Walter had known there was another place, another road, another version of the story, and for 45 years, he had kept it hidden behind a wall. Titan walked to Jack and touched his nose gently against Jack's wrist. Jack looked down at him. The dog's brown eyes were calm, present, waiting. Jack realized his own breathing had gone shallow. He forced air slowly into his lungs. In, hold, out. A routine learned years ago in another mountain range on the other side of the world. Titan remained beside him until the tension in Jack's hand eased. Good boy. Jack looked toward the window once more. Snow was thickening over Pine Hollow. The distant mountains had completely disappeared. For most of his life, Blackstone Ridge had been the place where Ethan's story ended. Now an old map suggested it might have been where another story began. Jack folded Walter's note, then the map. He slipped Ethan's dog tag into his shirt pocket. Titan immediately moved toward the door. This time Jack did not tell him no. He took his winter coat from the hook. Before leaving the study, he stopped and looked back at Walter's empty chair. You should have told me while you were alive. The room gave him nothing. Jack shut off the lamp. Outside, wind swept snow across the ranch in long white sheets, somewhere beyond those fields, beyond Pine Hollow, beyond a road that had been erased from every modern map. Blackstone Ridge waited under the storm. And for the first time in 45 years, Jack Callahan was no longer certain his brother had died there. What frightened him more was the possibility that Walter Callahan had known that all along. By 8 the next morning, Pine Hollow had disappeared beneath 6 inches of fresh snow. Jack drove slowly through town with Titan sitting upright in the passenger seat, the old hand-drawn map folded inside his coat, and Ethan's dog tag resting against his chest. The heater pushed warm air through the cab, but Jack barely noticed it. His mind had spent most of the night circling the same sentence. "Your brother did not die where I told you he did." Every time Jack closed his eyes, Walter's voice seemed to fill in the missing words, but it never gave him an answer. Pine Hollow was the kind of Wyoming town where people still waved at passing pickups and noticed when a porch light stayed on too late. A feed store stood beside a tire shop. Christmas garland had been wrapped around the old courthouse railings. Smoke rose from chimneys along Main Street and flattened beneath a low gray sky. Jack had grown up here. That made what he was about to do feel less like an investigation and more like opening the walls of his own childhood. County Records Office occupied the second floor of a brick building beside the sheriff's department. Jack parked near the rear entrance. Before he could reach for the door handle, Titan gave a low sound in his throat. Not a growl, a warning. Jack looked at him. Titan was staring past Jack's shoulder toward a dark pickup parked half a block away. Black, late model, engine running. The windshield was too reflective to see the driver. Jack watched it for 3 seconds. 4. Nothing happened. Easy. Titan remained rigid. Jack memorized the truck. No front plate visible from this angle. Mud along the wheel wells. A small dent behind the driver's side headlight. Then he got out. Titan followed. Rachel Foster was waiting for them in the archive room. At 46, Rachel had the quick, focused manner of someone who had spent half her life correcting other people's paperwork. Her brown hair was tied loosely behind her head, and reading glasses rested low on her nose. She had known Jack's mother for years through county land disputes and conservation hearings. The moment Jack unfolded Walter's map, Rachel stopped smiling. "Where did you get this?" "My father's study." She looked up. "Walter's?" Behind a false wall. That changed her expression completely. Jack placed the 1979 county map beside it. Rachel leaned over both. Titan settled near Jack's chair, but remained facing the door. Jack pointed. "This road." Rachel traced the faded line with one finger. "Blackstone Service Route 7. "You know it?" "I know the name. It isn't on anything current." "No." "Why?" Rachel did not answer immediately. She crossed the room to a bank of metal filing cabinets and pulled open one drawer. "Give me a minute." Jack watched her sort through hanging folders. Outside, snow tapped lightly against the tall windows. Rachel returned with an old plat book thick enough to stop a door. She opened it carefully. 778, the road was there. She turned several pages. 79, still there, still there. Then she reached 1982. Gone. Jack felt the same cold pressure he had felt in Walter's study. When was it removed? Rachel frowned. He had seen Walter sign checks that way. Birthday cards, school forms, mortgage papers, same heavy W, same straight underline. Rachel spoke quietly. "Jack?" He did not answer. The room seemed to shrink around him. Walter had spent months telling everyone he was searching for Ethan. Yet while Jack's mother still left Ethan's porch light burning every night, Walter had signed paperwork removing a road leading directly toward the place marked on his secret map. Rachel pulled another file onto the screen. "This gets stranger." Jack looked up. "The road didn't simply fall out of use." "What do you mean?" "It served a mineral survey lease." She rotated the monitor toward him. A company name appeared in faded type. Pike Western Resources. Jack recognized the name. Everyone in Pine Hollow did. Pike Western had once operated test drilling sites, gravel pits, and mineral leases throughout northwestern Wyoming. Its founder, Gordon Pike, had been one of Walter Callahan's closest friends. They hunted together, sat on county committees together. Jack remembered Gordon at family barbecues when he was a boy, always wearing polished boots and carrying expensive cigars Walter's wife made him smoke outside. How far did the lease extend? Rachel opened another plat. Most of the upper drainage. Her finger stopped near Walter's black X. Right here, Jack leaned closer. The old survey boundary wrapped almost perfectly around the location his father had marked. What were they looking for, officially? Copper-bearing formations. Maybe molybdenum. The reports say exploratory work only. When did they stop? Rachel searched. Her forehead tightened. Lease terminated January 1982, 10 months after Ethan disappeared. Yes. Jack looked at Titan. The dog was still facing the door. Something moved in the hallway. Titan's ears rose. A county employee passed by carrying boxes. Titan relaxed only slightly, Rachel noticed. He's still working, isn't he? He doesn't know how not to. Jack looked back at the records. Neither do I. Rachel studied him. You aren't planning to hike up there today? Jack folded his arms. I didn't say I was. You didn't need to. Storm doesn't hit hard until tonight. That's not what they're saying now. I've been through weather. That's exactly the kind of sentence that gets experienced people killed. Jack's mouth tightened. Rachel had known him too long to be intimidated by silence. She continued. Give me a few hours. Let me see what else is buried in these files. Jack looked again at Walter's signature. Someone already buried enough. Rachel's eyes shifted toward him. That's not what I meant, I know. She exhaled. Then something on the monitor caught her attention. Her hand stopped above the mouse. What? Rachel stared at the screen. These archive scans have access logs. Jack waited. This file was requested yesterday, so this system doesn't get many requests for 45-year-old abandoned road petitions. She clicked again. The mineral lease file, too. Jack's focus sharpened. When? Night. 7:42. By who? It came through an outside legal records account. Names are masked on this side. I can request the billing record. Jack looked toward the windows. The dark pickup was no longer where he had seen it. Titan stood before Jack moved. Jack walked to the glass. Across the street, tire tracks cut through fresh snow where the truck had been parked. Someone followed us. Rachel came beside him. You know that? No, Jack paused. But Titan noticed the truck before I did. Rachel looked down at the Malinois. Titan was staring at the empty street. Rachel's face lost some color. Jack, maybe you should call the sheriff and say what? A truck parked outside a public building? Say you found documents involving your missing brother and somebody else is pulling the same files. That's not a crime. No, but not yet. Rachel did not like the answer. Jack could see that. He gathered the documents. Rachel placed one hand over the petition before he could take it. Copies only. Jack looked at her. You sound like my mother. Your mother had good sense. She married Walter. Rachel's expression softened for half a second. Maybe everybody gets one mistake. The words landed harder than she intended. Jack looked away. An hour later, he and Titan sat in a rear booth at the Copper Lantern Diner. The place smelled of coffee, bacon grease, and wet winter coats. A small television above the counter showed a weather map covered in blue and purple warnings. Jack had chosen the booth because it gave him a view of both entrances and the parking lot. Old habits. Titan lay beneath the table. A waitress named June poured coffee. "Thought you gave up caffeine. I gave up sleeping first." She snorted. "Your dad used to say the same thing." Jack's hand tightened slightly around the mug. Everybody in Pine seemed to carry a piece of Walter. Titan shifted beneath the table. Jack felt the dog's shoulder touch his boot. He looked toward the window. The black pickup was back, across the highway. Same dent, same mud, engine running. This time Jack could make out a silhouette behind the wheel. Male baseball cap, looking toward the diner. Jack took a slow sip of coffee. Titan began to rise. Jack lowered one hand. Down. Titan obeyed, but instead of lying normally, he repositioned himself between Jack's legs and the window. A protective angle. Jack watched the truck through the reflection in the diner glass rather than looking directly at it. 30 seconds later, it pulled away. No rush. No squealing tires, just gone. That bothered Jack more. A nervous amateur would flee. Someone confident simply left. Jack paid his bill and walked outside. The temperature had dropped. Wind pushed fine snow across the pavement. Titan immediately crossed toward the place where the truck had been. He smelled one tire track, then another. Jack crouched beside him. "Anything?" Titan moved toward the road shoulder, nose low, then stopped where fresh tire tracks merged onto the highway. Jack stood. His phone rang. "Rachel," he answered. "Tell me you found the account." "Jack, listen to me." Her voice was different. Tighter, he turned away from the wind. "What happened?" "I kept digging into the mineral lease and I found an environmental inspection reference from 1981. The report itself isn't in the county system. Who signed it? That's not the problem." Jack felt Titan press close to his leg. "What is?" "There was a closed county hearing 3 weeks after Ethan disappeared. Walter attended it. Gordon Pike attended it." Jack stared toward the white mountains beyond town. Rachel continued. "I also found your father's name on another document, but it's incomplete. I need to pull the physical file from storage." "What document?" "I don't know yet. Something involving groundwater access and an emergency closure." Jack's pulse slowed rather than quickened. That was how his body handled real danger. Everything became clearer. Rachel said, "Jack, don't go up there yet. I found your father's name on something worse." Static broke across the line. "Rachel? Nothing. Rachel." The call dropped. Jack immediately called back. No connection. He checked the screen. 1 bar, then none. A gust of snow swept across the road. Titan looked toward the western mountains. Jack followed his gaze. The Absarokas had vanished beneath a dark bank of weather. He should have gone back to the archive. He knew that. Every rational part of him knew it. But someone had already accessed the files. Someone had followed him, and a winter storm was about to close Blackstone Ridge for days. If there was anything on that mountain connected to Ethan, Jack no longer knew whether it would still be there when the weather cleared. He opened the truck door. Titan jumped inside. Jack stood for another moment with one hand on the frame. 45 years earlier, Walter Callahan had signed his name and made a road disappear. Now someone was watching the only man who had begun looking for it again. Jack climbed behind the wheel. He set Walter's map on the passenger seat beside Titan. Then he turned the truck west, toward Blackstone Ridge, toward the road that officially had not existed since 1981. And somewhere ahead of him, beneath the gathering storm, somebody already knew he was coming. The pavement ended 12 miles west of Pine Hollow. From there, the road narrowed into packed snow and old gravel, cutting between dark lodgepole pines before climbing toward Blackstone Ridge, Jack kept both hands steady on the wheel. Hutton sat rigid beside him. The dog had stopped watching Jack. Now he watched the trees. That mattered. Jack had spent enough years working beside Titan to know the difference between curiosity and concern. Curiosity made the Malinois lean forward. Concern made him still. The farther they drove, the quieter Titan became. Jack checked the mirrors. No black pickup, no headlights behind them. Only snow. The old road climbed for another 3 miles before Jack saw the first sign of abandonment. A rusted Forest Service gate stood open beside the trail, half swallowed by brush. The metal sign hanging from it had faded almost white. Road closed. Jack slowed. There were no tire tracks beyond it. At least none he could see beneath the new snow. He pulled over beside a stand of spruce. The temperature had fallen again. Jack zipped his coat higher and stepped out. Titan jumped down after him and immediately raised his nose into the wind. Easy. Jack opened the tailgate. He had packed light winter survival gear, a medical kit, water, food for both of them, 2 emergency blankets, a handheld radio, flare launcher, rope, hatchet, snowshoes strapped to the outside of the pack, and Walter's map sealed inside a waterproof pouch. Jack checked the sky. Low clouds moved fast across the ridge. The storm was coming earlier than forecast. He should have waited. Rachel had told him to wait. That thought lasted less than a second. 45 years was long enough. Jack shouldered the pack. Titan stepped to his left side. Let's see what Dad wanted buried. They crossed the gate. For the first mile, the trail was easy to follow. Not because it was maintained, because the land remembered where a road had once been. The trees grew differently along the old corridor. Snow settled flatter. Occasionally, Jack found a rotting timber post or a ditch cut too straight to be natural. Walter's hand-drawn map matched each bend. That bothered him more than he expected. His father had not copied this from memory once. He had known the route intimately. At a fork near a frozen drainage, Jack stopped and compared the terrain to the old map. Titan walked 10 feet ahead, then stopped, his head turned toward the north slope. Jack followed his gaze. Nothing. Smell something? Titan moved uphill and sniffed beneath the snow. Jack followed. The dog pawed once. Metal scraped beneath his claws. Jack crouched and cleared the snow with one glove. A steel marker emerged, square, corroded, stamped with letters. PWR-17, Pike Western Resources. Jack stared at it. They were still miles below the old survey lease. What were you doing this far down? Tan moved on. Jack took a photograph of the marker. No signal. He saved it anyway. They continued. The forest thickened. Wind worked through the upper branches with a low, distant roar. Jack began seeing more evidence. A length of old insulated cable running beneath fallen leaves. A concrete footing near the creek. 2 rusted bolts driven into bedrock. None of it appeared on modern maps. The road had been more than an access trail. It had carried equipment, heavy equipment. Around noon, Blackstone Creek came into view. The water was mostly frozen, a dark ribbon trapped beneath blue-white ice. Walter's map showed a bridge. Jack saw it through the trees 30 yards ahead. Old timber, narrow, 1 lane wide. Snow covered the planks evenly. Jack slowed. Titan did not. The dog approached the bridge, stopped at the entrance, and lowered his head. Jack watched. Titan sniffed the air, then the first plank, then the side rail. He backed away. Jack frowned. Come on. Titan did not move. Jack stepped onto the bridge. The timber creaked beneath his boot. Normal, old wood, cold weather. He looked back. Titan, heel. The dog stayed exactly where he was. Jack's eyes narrowed. Titan had ignored commands only a handful of times in his entire working life, usually when the command was wrong. Jack stepped back off the bridge. Titan immediately moved sideways toward the creek bank. "What's wrong?" The dog sniffed near the left support post, then looked at Jack. Jack crouched. At first he saw nothing unusual. Snow packed around the base, ice-rot. Then he brushed away a thin crust beneath the support beam. A clean line appeared in the wood. Too clean. Jack cleared more snow. The beam had been cut almost all the way through, not cracked, cut. A saw blade had left fresh pale wood beneath the weathered surface. Jack's body went very still. He crossed to the opposite side. The second main support showed the same thing. Someone had cut both beams and packed snow back around them. The bridge was a trap. Jack stepped away carefully. Titan stood beside him. "Good call." The words came quietly. Jack looked across the creek. If he had driven onto that bridge earlier, it might have dropped the truck straight into the channel. If he had crossed on foot, carrying the pack, a loud crack exploded behind him. Jack spun. One support beam gave way. The bridge sagged sharply. Snow slid from the railing. Then the center section dropped several feet with a grinding roar of timber and ice. Jack froze. The sound became something else. For half a heartbeat, Wyoming disappeared. Night, rock walls, rotor wash, a mountain pass in Afghanistan, a radio screaming through static, men shouting below him. Then the avalanche came. Jack's chest locked, his vision tunneled. He could smell diesel, dust, burned wiring, not snow, not pine. His right hand twitched toward a weapon that was not there. "Reed!" The name escaped before he could stop it. Titan moved immediately. The dog pressed hard against Jack's left thigh. Jack did not respond. Titan pushed again, more firmly. Jack looked down. Brown eyes, black muzzle, snow on the dog's ears. Wyoming, Blackstone Creek, present day. Jack drew one breath, then another. Titan stayed against him. Jack put one gloved hand on the dog's neck. "I'm here." Titan did not move. Jack closed his eyes briefly. "I'm here." The mountain pass faded. He could hear Blackstone Creek beneath the ice again. The wind, the ruined bridge. Jack crouched beside Titan and pressed his forehead against the dog's head for 1 second. "No longer. That was enough. Thanks." Titan licked the edge of his glove. Jack stood. The fear was gone. What remained was colder, intentional sabotage. Recent sabotage. Jack examined the cuts again. No moss, no dark oxidation. Fresh enough that the exposed wood still smelled faintly of sap. Someone had known he would come this way, or someone had been protecting the ridge long before he arrived. Neither answer was good. Jack looked upstream. The creek narrowed near a rock shelf. They could cross there. He took out Walter's map. The old route crossed at the bridge, but a penciled line branched north for roughly 200 yards before reconnecting beyond the creek. A bypass. Walter had marked it. Jack stared at the note beside it. Winter only. His father had known another way around. "Of course you did." Titan began moving upstream. Jack followed. The crossing took 20 minutes. Ice covered most of the creek. But Jack tested every step with a trekking pole before committing weight. Whoever made them had stepped off the old road and cut through the trees, trying not to leave an obvious trail. Jack rose. Titan sniffed one print, then pulled gently uphill. Jack held him back. "No." Titan looked at him. "We don't chase what we don't understand." The old operator in Jack had fully awakened now. Someone had sabotaged the bridge. Someone had walked this ridge recently. Someone had accessed the county archives. The black pickup had followed him through Pine Hollow. These were no longer coincidences. Jack reached for the radio clipped to his pack. "Rachel, this is Jack." Static. He tried again. Nothing. The ridge blocked the signal. He took out his phone. No service. The wind strengthened. Snow moved sideways through the trees. Jack looked toward the mountain. He should turn back. That was what training said when intelligence failed and weather deteriorated. But the bridge behind him was unusable now. The safer route back would require following the creek several miles downstream. And somewhere ahead was the answer Walter had hidden for nearly half a century. Jack opened the map once more. The hand-drawn route continued directly through the trees, where the fresh boot prints disappeared. Titan watched him. Jack folded the map. "Looks like we're going the same way." They climbed. The forest grew darker as the clouds thickened. Several times Titan stopped to test the wind. Jack began seeing fragments of old infrastructure under the snow. Steel cable, a broken ceramic insulator, a rusted junction box nailed to a tree that had grown halfway around it. Then something stranger. 3 concrete pillars, arranged in a straight line, buried nearly to their tops. Jack cleared one with his boot. There were bolt holes in the surface, heavy equipment mounts. He looked around. No structure remained. Only trees. Whatever Pike Western had operated here had been dismantled so completely that the forest had almost erased it. Almost. Titan suddenly stiffened. Jack raised one hand. The dog froze. A sound moved somewhere ahead. Not wind. A dull metallic knock. Once, then silence. Jack waited. 10 seconds. 20. Nothing. He motioned Titan forward. They advanced slowly. The boot prints reappeared near a fallen pine, then stopped. Jack crouched beside the last one. The person had turned. The toe pointed downhill now, back toward Jack's route. His skin prickled. Someone had stood here, watching. Jack scanned the trees, no movement. Then he noticed a small patch of disturbed snow against a trunk. A cigarette butt, still dry beneath the fresh flakes. Jack touched the paper. Not warm, but recent. Titan's hackles rose. Jack whispered, "We're not alone." The dog gave no sound. He did not need to. Far below, hidden by trees, something broke loose with a deep wooden crash. The bridge, the remaining section, had finally collapsed into Blackstone Creek. Jack listened until the echo faded. Their easiest way back was gone. Ahead, fresh footprints led toward Blackstone Ridge. Behind them, the sabotaged bridge now lay in pieces beneath the snow. And above the treetops, the first wall of the approaching blizzard rolled over the mountain like a sheet of white smoke. Jack watched it for 3 seconds. That was enough. Weather moved differently in high country. A storm could look distant and still be on top of you before you finished tightening a strap. He checked Walter's map. The penciled route climbed another 2 miles toward a narrow saddle below Blackstone Ridge. Too far. Jack looked back toward the creek. The bridge was gone. The downstream crossing would take hours. Titan stood facing uphill, nose high, reading the wind. "We move fast." The Malinois stepped forward. Snow began to thicken almost immediately. At first it fell straight. Then the wind turned. Flakes slashed through the trees at an angle, collecting along Jack's shoulders and the top of Titan's back. The old road narrowed into a corridor between lodgepole pines. Half-buried survey markers appeared at irregular intervals. Titan stopped at one and scraped snow aside. A twisted length of insulated cable emerged. Jack followed it with his eyes. It disappeared beneath the slope. 20 yards farther, he found another section, then a broken concrete base, then another, a straight line. Jack crouched. This wasn't just a road. Chan sniffed the concrete. Jack brushed away ice. 4 rusted anchor bolts had once held something heavy in place, a transformer perhaps, or pumping equipment. He looked uphill. The terrain did not fit a simple mineral survey. Too much infrastructure, too much effort. Pike Western had built something here, and somebody had worked very hard to make sure nothing obvious remained. Wind bent the treetops. A branch cracked high above them. Jack looked up. "Move!" They pushed on. The snow deepened rapidly. Within 20 minutes, Jack's boot tracks began disappearing almost as soon as he made them. The old footprints they had been following vanished completely. Titan tried to pick up the trail again, circling once, then twice. No scent. The wind had scrubbed the mountain clean. Jack pulled his scarf over his mouth. Visibility dropped below 50 yards, then 30. The world lost color. Trees became gray shapes. The ground and sky blended into the same moving white. Jack stopped beside a boulder and checked the map beneath his coat. Walter's route should have bent northeast. He looked at his compass. The needle trembled. Northeast. He picked a dark stand of timber barely visible through the snow. That way, Titan moved ahead. Jack followed. The next hour became a series of short decisions. 10 more yards, find the next tree, check the slope, protect the shoulder, keep Titan in sight. The wind strengthened until walking directly into it became difficult. Jack leaned forward, one hand gripping his trekking pole. Titan lowered his body and pushed through snow now reaching almost to his chest in places. A gust tore loose from the ridge. Jack heard it before it hit. A deep roar through the pines. Down! Titan dropped. Jack turned his shoulder into the wind. The gust struck hard enough to make him stagger. Snow exploded from the branches. Then came the crack. Sharp, violent. A dead limb tore free above him. Jack looked up too late. The branch hit his right shoulder and drove him sideways. Pain flashed white. His boot lost purchase. The slope disappeared beneath him. Jack went down. He slid 10 feet before hitting a buried log. Air burst from his lungs. For several seconds, he heard nothing but wind. Then Titan was there. The dog scrambled down the slope and pressed against Jack's chest. Jack tried to sit up. Pain shot from his shoulder into his neck. Easy! He moved his fingers. They worked. No fracture he could feel. Probably a deep bruise. Maybe a strain. He pushed himself onto one knee. Another blast of wind struck the ridge. Something metallic banged somewhere in the storm. Once, then again. Jack froze. The mountain changed. The snow beneath his hand became powdered dust. The cold became heat. White air became brown. The metallic banging became a radio antenna striking armor. Jack's breath stopped. No. He knew what was happening. No, did not stop it. The pine trees disappeared. A narrow Afghan pass rose around him. Dark rock, rotor wash, gunfire echoing between cliffs, someone shouting through a radio. "Callahan, we're pinned!" Jack squeezed his eyes shut. The voice grew louder. Another voice joined it. Reed, then Mason. 2 men he had carried in memory for more than 20 years. The avalanche had blocked the extraction route. Enemy fire had cut off the alternate path. Jack had chosen a third route. Too late. The radio had gone quiet before he reached them. The wind screamed. Jack's hand dug into the snow. "Reed!" Titan barked. One sharp command. Jack did not hear it as a dog. He heard gunfire. Titan barked to Senna. Closer. Jack opened his eyes. But the ridge and the battlefield overlapped. Snow, dust, pine, rock. He could not separate them. His breathing became fast and shallow. Sounds pushed beneath Jack's injured arm. Jack gasped as pain shot through his shoulder. That pain was real, and barked directly into his face. Once, twice. Jack stared at him. Brown eyes, snow crusting the whiskers, black leather collar, Wyoming, not Afghanistan. Titan drove his shoulder harder against Jack's ribs. An old grounding behavior. Pressure, contact, present. Jack put one hand on the dog's neck. Titan, the name came rough. Titan stopped barking. Jack forced himself to inhale. 4 counts, hold. Exhale, again. The phantom radio faded. The voices withdrew. The mountain returned. Jack bowed his head until his forehead touched Titan's. I'm here. The dog stayed still. Jack breathed again. I'm here. The storm answered with another howl, but this time it was only weather. Jack sat back against the buried log. His entire body trembled. Not from cold. He hated that more than the pain. He had spent years believing discipline could make the memories smaller. Sometimes it did. Sometimes one sound opened a door and everything came through at once. Titan licked snow from Jack's glove. Jack gave a weak laugh. You always know before I do. The dog stared at him. Jack looked uphill. Nothing recognizable remained. No road, no footprints, no visible ridge, only white. He checked the compass. The needle wandered slightly. Too much exposed metal somewhere nearby. Old infrastructure could be interfering. He checked the GPS. The screen flickered. Battery half full, no position lock. Perfect. Jack tried the radio. Static. He changed channels. Nothing. The storm had sealed them in. He stood carefully. His shoulder protested. But he could move. They needed shelter. Now, Jack looked for natural options. Rock overhang, dense timber, windbreak. Nothing close enough. He pulled Walter's map again, protecting it inside his coat. There was no building marked anywhere nearby. No cabin, no survey station, nothing. Titan suddenly turned west. Jack watched. The dog raised his muzzle, sniffed, then took several steps away from the route. Titan. The dog stopped, looked back, then continued. Jack followed for 10 yards. What do you have? Titan moved faster. Jack almost called him back. The dog was leaving the map route entirely. Then another gust swallowed him. Titan vanished. Titan! No answer. Jack's heartbeat jumped. He moved after him. Titan! Snow struck his face hard enough to sting. He could see less than 15 feet. A dark shadow appeared, then disappeared. Jack pushed forward. His boot sank to mid-calf. He nearly fell. Titan! A bark came from somewhere ahead. Short, urgent. Jack followed it. Another bark, farther left. He changed direction. The ground rose. Jack stumbled through a drift and hit something solid with his hand. Stone. He stopped. At first he thought it was a boulder. Then his glove moved along a flat surface. Mortar, a wall. Jack lifted his head. The storm shifted for one moment. A shape emerged. Low, rectangular, built directly against the slope. A roof covered in snow, a narrow chimney. Jack stared. No Titan appeared beside the structure and barked. Jack stepped closer. The building was made from dark fieldstone, old but solid. No window on the side facing the storm. A heavy wooden door stood beneath a shallow overhang. There was no structure marked on Walter's map, no county survey, no road. Nothing should have been here. Titan went to the door, then stopped. His behavior changed. He was no longer searching. He was listening. Jack approached slowly. A strange sensation crawled across the back of his neck. Someone in there? Titan whined, softly. Jack had heard Titan whine from pain, from frustration. Once, years ago, when a handler he trusted had been taken away by ambulance, this sound was different, almost uncertain. Jack reached for the door, then stopped. Something moved above him. A thin gray ribbon curled from the chimney. Smoke. Fresh smoke. Jack stared at it as the wind tore it apart. A fire was burning inside. He touched the wooden door, not frozen shut, not buried, recently used. The brass latch was cold, but clean. Titan pressed his nose along the bottom seam, then gave the same quiet whine. Jack looked back into the whiteout. They were miles from any maintained trail. Someone had sabotaged the bridge below. Someone had walked this ridge before them. And now, in the middle of a blizzard, they had found a stone hut that did not exist on any map. A hut with smoke coming from its chimney. Jack wrapped his hand around the latch. Titan. The dog looked at him. "If this goes bad, you stay behind me." Titan's ears came forward. Jack pulled. The door opened inward. Warm air touched his face, not stale warmth, living warmth, fire, wood smoke, something cooking. Jack stood motionless in the doorway. Behind him, the blizzard erased their tracks almost as quickly as they had made them. Ahead, somewhere inside the impossible stone hut, a fire crackled in the dark. Jack stepped across the threshold first. Titan followed close against his left leg. For several seconds, neither of them moved farther. The change in temperature was almost painful. Outside, the storm had driven ice against Jack's face and frozen the fabric around his shoulders stiff. Inside, heat from a stone fireplace reached him in slow waves, thawing his skin faster than his body could understand. The room was small. One main space, low timber ceiling, rough stone walls blackened by years of smoke. A narrow cot stood against the far side beneath a wool blanket. A wooden table occupied the center. 2 chairs, shelves built from hand-hewn pine, a cast-iron stove near the fireplace, and on that stove sat a metal kettle. Steam curled from its spout. Jack stared at it. Titan moved deeper into the room. Easy. The dog ignored the food bowl-sized pot beside the stove and began checking corners. Jack closed the door behind them. The blizzard became a muffled roar. Suddenly the hut felt too quiet. He unzipped his coat, but kept it on. His right shoulder throbbed. He tested the joint again. Painful. Functional. He had worked through worse. What he could not work through was the question standing in front of him. Who had lit the fire? Jack crossed to the stove. A shallow iron pot sat beside the kettle. He lifted the lid. Vegetable stew, potatoes, carrots, beans, still warm enough to send steam into his face. He replaced the lid immediately. That's recent. Titan sniffed beneath the table. Jack scanned the room again. 1 plate, 1 metal cup, a pocket knife near the cutting board, fresh wood stacked beside the fireplace, not fresh from a store, recently split. The exposed grain was pale and clean. Jack touched 1 piece dry. Someone maintained this place. Someone had been here today. He moved toward the cot. The blanket was folded back at one corner. A depression remained in the pillow. Jack placed his bare fingers against the wool. Warm. His eyes narrowed. Whoever was here didn't leave long ago. Titan stopped near the wall, his head tilted. Jack followed the dog's attention. Nothing obvious. Find something? Titan sniffed along the stone, then continued. Jack returned to the door. He opened it 2 inches and looked outside. White. No person. No visible tracks. The storm had already erased nearly everything. He closed it again. That made the room feel stranger. Someone had walked out of a warm hut into a deadly whiteout, or someone was still nearby. Jack checked the shelves. Canned food, salt, coffee, matches, a battered first aid tin. Nothing modern enough to tell him who owned the place. He found a lantern, fuel inside. A wool coat hung from a peg near the fireplace. Jack touched the sleeve. Damp, snowmelt, recent again. He searched the pockets carefully. Empty, no wallet, no keys, no identification. Titan circled back. The Malinois sniffed the coat once, then turned away with no urgency. Not a threat scent, not something he recognized either. Jack finally removed his pack. Pain flashed through his shoulder. He stopped. Titan was beside him instantly. "I'm fine." Titan stared. Jack almost laughed. "Yeah, I know. You don't believe me." He sat at the table and opened the medical kit. The shoulder had begun swelling beneath the base layer. No obvious deformity. He wrapped it firmly, then swallowed 2 pain relievers with lukewarm water from his canteen. His hands had finally stopped shaking from the cold. The moment relief entered his body, fatigue followed. That was always how it worked. Survive first. Feel later. Callahan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. For a few seconds he allowed himself to listen to the fire. No wind in Afghanistan, no radio, no voices, just timber popping in flame. Titan came over and pressed against his shin. Jack rested his good hand on the dog's neck. "You got us here." Titan's tail moved once, "but I still don't know where here is." Jack pulled Walter's map from its waterproof pouch. He spread it on the table. The ridgeline matched, the creek, the saddle, the contour of the slope, but no hut, not even a handwritten mark. Walter had mapped the road, the bridge, the old mineral route. He had marked the upper ridge with an X. Yet this structure was missing. Jack looked around again. That felt deliberate. The hut was not new. The stonework had decades of age in it. Some mortar joints had been repaired more than once. The floorboards were worn smooth between the bed, table, and stove. Someone had lived here for years, maybe decades. Titan suddenly crossed the room toward a narrow shelf beside the fireplace. He stopped beneath it, then looked back. Jack recognized that look. "What?" Titan rose onto his front paws against the wall, not scratching, just reaching. Jack stood. The shelf held several small objects: a wooden comb, a tin cup, 2 old paperback westerns, a box of cartridges so old the cardboard had faded, and a framed photograph. Jack almost ignored it. Then he saw the younger man's face. His body went rigid. "No." He lifted the frame. Dust coated the glass, but the picture itself was clear. 2 men stood outside the same stone hut. Summer, no snow, tall grass around their boots. One man looked to be in his mid-20s, lean, dark hair. Longer than Jack remembered, a crooked smile. Jack knew that smile. He had spent his childhood trying to imitate it. Ethan. The name left him as a whisper. Titan looked up. Jack moved closer to the fire. The photograph shook slightly in his hand, not because of the cold. Ethan Callahan, alive, standing in sunlight. Older than 17, much older. Jack studied every feature, the line of the jaw, the ears, the eyes. A small scar through the left eyebrow from when Ethan fell off the hayloft at 14. Was no possibility of mistake. It was him. Jack sat down hard. The room seemed to tilt. For 45 years, Ethan existed in Jack's memory at 17. Always 17. Frozen in a school photograph. Frozen in Walter's story. Frozen in the storm. But the man in Jack's hand had survived long enough to become someone Jack had never known. He turned the frame slightly. The second man stood beside Ethan. Older. Broad through the shoulders. One hand resting on Ethan's back. Jack knew him too. Gordon Pike. The same Gordon Pike who used to sit on their porch drinking bourbon with Walter. The same Gordon Pike whose company lease ended less than a year after Ethan disappeared. Jack's pulse began to pound. "No." Titan nudged his thigh. Jack stared at Gordon's face. "What were you doing with him?" He pulled the photograph from the frame. Writing ran beneath the image. November 1988, Jack stopped breathing, 7 years. Ethan had survived 7 years beyond the date Walter told everyone he died. 7 years in which Jack graduated high school. 7 years in which their mother cried every February. 7 years in which Walter supposedly searched and found nothing. Jack closed his eyes. Hope arrived. Not gently, it hit like pain. If Ethan had lived until 1988, then every assumption Jack had built his life around was wrong. But 1988 was still nearly 4 decades ago. The picture did not tell him whether Ethan had survived beyond that. It only proved the lie was larger. Jack looked at Titan. The dog remained focused on the frame. "You brought me here for this?" Titan sniffed the photograph. Then the air beneath the shelf. Jack turned the picture over. There was writing on the back, different from Walter's, more slanted, more hurried. Jack recognized it from old birthday cards Ethan had given him as a boy. His brother's handwriting, one sentence. "If Jack ever finds this place, don't let Pike reach the lower room first." Jack read it twice. The relief he had felt from finding shelter disappeared. His attention shifted immediately. Lower room. There was no lower room. Not that Jack could see. Titan suddenly moved away from him. He crossed to the fireplace, sniffed the stone, then one seam near the floor. Jack stood slowly. "What do you have?" Titan's claws touched the stone once, a deliberate scrape. Jack looked from the dog to the photograph in his hand. Outside, the blizzard slammed against the hut. Inside, the fire burned steadily, and somewhere beneath or behind these walls was something Ethan Callahan had hidden from Gordon Pike, something important enough that, decades later, Ethan had left instructions specifically for Jack. Jack slipped the photograph inside his coat. Then he looked toward the fireplace. "All right, brother." Titan scraped the stone again. Jack stepped closer. "Show me what you were afraid he'd find." Titan lowered his nose to the seam again. The stone beside the fireplace looked no different from the others at first. Dark with soot. Rough at the edges. Mortar packed deep between the blocks, but Titan kept returning to the same narrow line near the floor. Jack knelt. His shoulder protested immediately. He ignored it. With his good hand, he brushed soot from the stones. Nothing. Titan scratched once. A dull, metallic sound answered from beneath the grime. Jack stopped. He scraped harder with the edge of his pocket knife. Black soot flaked away. There, a small steel loop embedded between 2 stones, not part of the fireplace, a latch. Jack looked back at Titan. Good boy. He hooked 2 fingers through the loop and pulled. It did not move. He tried again. Still nothing. The metal had probably not been opened in years. Jack took the hatchet from his pack and used the flat side to tap gently around the stone. Mortar dust fell. The latch shifted. Then came a low click. One section of the wall moved inward, less than an inch. Jack stared. Well, I'll be damned. He gripped the edge and pulled. A narrow stone-faced panel swung open. Cold air spilled from the darkness behind it. Not enough for a passage, a cavity, maybe 3 feet deep. Titan immediately pushed his nose toward the opening. Wait. Jack switched on his flashlight. The beam revealed a steel box, 2 cylindrical film canisters, a cloth-wrapped bundle, and what looked like an old field notebook. Everything had been placed carefully, protected. Hidden. Jack reached for the notebook first. The cover was cracked brown leather. No name on the front. He opened it. The first page settled every doubt. Ethan Callahan, 1981 PBO. Field crew Jack sat back on his heels, his brother's handwriting. Not a photograph now. Not Walter's confession, Ethan's own words. Titan settled beside him. Jack turned the page. At first, the entries were ordinary. equipment checks, weather conditions, survey coordinates, water levels, names of workers. Then, halfway through July, the tone changed. Jack read slowly. Samples from Drainage 3 came back wrong again. Pike says the lab contaminated them. He turned the page. Second test. Same result. Chlorinated solvent compounds well above baseline. Jack frowned. He knew enough from ranch work to understand what that meant. Industrial chemicals, not something that belonged in mountain groundwater. Another entry. Drainage 3 feeds south toward Pine Hollow Ranch wells, told Foreman. He said forget it. Jack's jaw tightened. He read faster. The handwriting became more hurried as the dates advanced. Ethan had begun collecting his own samples, marking underground flow paths, photographing drums stored near a sealed trench, recording truck numbers, and then the name appeared. Gordon Pike. Jack stopped. July 29, 1981, Gordon came up today. Said, I don't understand what closing this site would do to Pine Hollow. Said people depend on these jobs. Told me to stop testing water that isn't my responsibility. Jack looked toward the photograph hidden inside his coat. Gordon Pike smiling beside Ethan in 1988, 7 years later. Why would Ethan stand beside the man he feared? The answer was not here yet. Jack kept reading. August, September, more tests, more contamination. Then Walter, Dad knows. Jack's grip tightened on the notebook. He read the entire entry. I told Dad everything tonight. Showed him numbers. He went quiet. Said I had no idea what would happen if Pike Western shut down. Half the valley has loans tied to Pike contracts. County approved the access permits last year. Dad signed 2 of them. Jack stared into the fire. Walter. Livestock. Commissioner, respected, honest. The word suddenly felt useless. Jack continued. Dad says give him time. Says he'll speak to Gordon privately. Next page. Dad came back angry. Told me not to take anything to the state. Said we'll fix it here. Next. I asked what happens if families are drinking it now. Jack felt something heavy settle in his chest. Pine Hollow was ranch country. Wells mattered. Water was life. If Ethan had been right, this had never been just about one company. It could have touched entire families. Titan shifted closer. Jack turned another page. A loose photograph slid free. He caught it before it hit the floor. The image was faded but clear enough. Rows of metal drums beside a trench. Black liquid staining snow. A Pike Western truck parked nearby. Handwritten on the back. Lower drainage. FEB 1981. Jack looked toward the hidden cavity, the film canisters. More photographs. Evidence Ethan had collected. He reached for the cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside were folded laboratory reports, water testing sheets, typed numbers, dates, locations. Several results were circled in red pencil. Jack did not understand every chemical abbreviation, but he understood the repeated word printed beside multiple readings. Unsafe. One page listed private ranch wells downstream. He recognized names, families still living in Pine Hollow. Some were people who had attended Walter's funeral. Jack sat very still. The story had just grown beyond anything personal. His brother's disappearance was connected to something that could have affected the whole valley. Maybe still did. Titan raised his head when Jack's breathing changed. Jack placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. I'm okay. This time he meant it. He was angry, but clear. Anger had become useful. He returned to the compartment. Behind the film was a small rectangular object, an old micro-cassette recorder. Beside it lay 3 tapes. 2 were labeled with dates. The third had 4 words written across a strip of white tape. Jack, if Dad never tells you. Jack did not move. The fire snapped behind him. Outside, the wind pressed against the stone walls. Titan looked from the cassette to Jack. Jack picked it up carefully. His thumb rested on the label. "If Dad never tells you." That meant Ethan had expected Walter to speak, expected him to confess at some point, maybe soon, maybe years later. But Walter never had, not while Jack's mother was alive, not when Jack enlisted, not when Jack came home from his first deployment, not when he buried friends, not when Walter began forgetting names. Nothing. 45 years of silence. Jack placed the cassette on the table. Before playing it, he went back to the notebook. He wanted context, needed it. The final pages from early 1981 had been torn out, but later entries resumed. February 17th, 2 days before Ethan officially disappeared. Gordon knows I copied the test sheets. February 18th, someone searched my truck. Then, Dad says I need to stay home tomorrow. Says he'll handle Pike. The next page was blank. Jack flipped forward. Nothing for almost 7 years. Then one final entry dated November 1988. Jack's heart accelerated. It explained the photograph, at least part of it. Gordon came to the hut today. Jack read the next line twice. He says he wants this finished. I don't believe him. Another line. Dad still thinks silence keeps Jack safe. Jack stopped. So Walter had still known Ethan was alive in 1988. The realization was no longer theoretical. It was written by Ethan himself. Jack closed his eyes. The anger rose, not explosive, dense. 45 years. His father had watched Jack mourn a living brother, had watched their mother grow old, believing one son was gone. Why? To protect whom? Jack reopened the notebook. The next sentence seemed almost written for him. Dad says if the truth comes out, Pine Hollow dies with Pike. Jack looked at the water reports. There it was. The logic of cowardice, jobs, reputation, mortgages, permit signatures, a town's stability. One lie protecting another until no one could see where the first lie ended. Titan rested his chin against Jack's knee. Jack stared at the fire. My whole life. The words came out quieter than he intended. He stopped. Titan stayed. Jack put the notebook down. He did not need to finish the sentence. His whole life had been built around an absence that may have been manufactured. He reached for the micro-cassette recorder. The battery compartment was corroded. Jack cleaned the contacts with the edge of a cloth, then replaced the batteries with 2 spares from his pack. The machine clicked when he pressed play. Thunk. He pressed stop, rewound. The tiny motor whined. Jack waited, then pressed play again. Static filled the hut, a faint scrape, breathing, then a man's voice. Older than the 17-year-old Jack remembered, but unmistakable. Ethan. Jack's eyes closed. For 1 second he was back in the old barn, Ethan telling him to stop stealing his gloves, Ethan laughing. Then the recorded voice spoke again. If you're hearing this, then Dad either finally found the courage to tell you, a pause, or he didn't. Jack swallowed. Titan lifted his head. Ethan continued. Dad lied to you. Jack's jaw tightened. But if you're listening to this, understand something. Static crackled. The tape warped for half a second. Then Ethan's voice returned. Dad wasn't the man I was most afraid of. Jack leaned closer to the recorder. The fire seemed to fade behind him. The entire hut narrowed to that small machine on the table. Ethan inhaled. When Gordon found out what I copied, he told Dad this stopped being about water. Another pause. He said people could lose everything. Jack stared at the photograph of the contaminated drainage. Ethan's voice dropped lower. And then he told Dad what would happen to us if I talked. The tape hissed. Jack's fingers curled around the edge of the table. Outside, Wind struck the stone wall hard enough to shake soot from the chimney. Titan suddenly turned toward the door. His ears rose. Jack noticed. "What is it?" The cassette kept playing. Ethan's voice became distant beneath static. Jack pressed pause. Silence. Titan stood. His body had changed completely. No longer relaxed. No longer curious. Listening. Jack rose slowly. His injured shoulder burned. He ignored it. Titan moved toward the door and sniffed beneath the threshold. Nothing. Then he returned to the fireplace. Not the hidden compartment. Higher, toward the stone wall. He listened. Jack held still. At first he heard only the storm, then something else, a muffled crunch, snow under weight. Once, then again, Jack looked toward the dark window. Someone was moving outside, the fresh fire, the warm food, the damp coat. Whoever maintained this hut might finally be returning. Or the person who sabotaged the bridge had followed them all the way up Blackstone Ridge. Jack switched off the lamp. The room dropped into firelight. Titan gave a low, warning growl. Jack looked at the cassette recorder. Ethan's unfinished sentence waited beneath his thumb. "Dad wasn't the man I was most afraid of." Jack pressed play, static. Then Ethan's voice returned, almost a whisper. "If anything happens to me, don't trust Pike." A sound came through the old recording. A knock. Not from Jack's door, from Ethan's past. Ethan stopped speaking. 3 seconds of silence passed on the tape. Then his voice whispered, "Someone's outside." Jack's blood went cold. The recording continued. Pike found the hut. The tape cut off. At that exact moment, Titan's growl deepened, and outside the real hut, 45 years later, fresh footsteps stopped on the other side of the door. Jack did not move. Neither did Titan. The fire whispered behind them. For several seconds, the only other sound was wind dragging snow across the stone walls. Jack lowered one hand toward Titan. "Hold." The Malinois remained rigid beside him. Jack watched the door. No knock came, no voice, nothing touched the latch. He waited another 10 seconds, then 20. Titan's growl faded, but his attention did not. Jack stepped toward the small side window and wiped frost from the glass with his sleeve. White darkness pressed against it. No silhouette, no movement. The storm had buried the world. Jack looked down. Still there? Latan sniffed beneath the door. His ears shifted. Then he backed away half a step. Whatever had moved outside was no longer directly in front of them, or it had simply stopped making noise. Jack did not like either possibility. He returned to the table. The cassette recorder sat beside Ethan's notebook. Its tiny reels were motionless. 45 years had separated Jack from his brother's voice. He was not going to let a shadow outside stop him from hearing the rest. Jack pressed rewind. The machine whined softly. San stayed near the door. Jack found the point just before Ethan's warning and pressed play. Static. Then Ethan again. "Dad wasn't the man I was most afraid of." Jack leaned forward. "Gordon found out I copied the test sheets before I could get them to anyone outside the county. Somebody searched my truck. Then somebody followed me home." Jack's expression hardened. The recording crackled. "I told Dad." He finally understood Pike wasn't trying to scare me anymore. A pause. He was trying to contain me. Jack glanced at the photograph of Gordon Pike standing beside Ethan 7 years after his supposed death. That picture made less sense with every sentence. Ethan continued. "The storm came in on February 19th. Dad found me before Gordon's men did." Jack stopped breathing. February 19th, the day Ethan vanished. "He drove me north instead of home. Said we only needed a few days, maybe 2 weeks. long enough for him to talk Gordon down and move copies of the evidence somewhere safe. Jack shut his eyes. Walter had found him, not months later, not by accident. That night, the same night Jack had been sitting beside the kitchen window waiting for headlights, waiting for his brother, waiting for his father to bring him home. Ethan's voice continued. Dad brought me to an old survey shelter near Blackstone. We rebuilt part of it. He said nobody knew the upper trail except Pike's crew. Jack slowly looked around the stone hut. The walls, the hand-cut beams, the fireplace. So Walter had been here, not merely passing through, helping. He made me promise not to contact Mom or Jack until he said it was safe. Jack's jaw tightened. I believed him. The tape hissed. That was the first mistake. Jack looked away. Tannen glanced back at him from the door. Jack forced himself to stay still. Ethan spoke again. A week passed, then 3. His voice sounded tired now. Every time Dad came up, he said Gordon needed more time. The county needed more time. Pine Hollow needed more time. Jack already knew what came next. Still, hearing Ethan say it hurt differently. Then Dad told me he'd told everyone I was probably dead. Jack's fingers curled against the table. He said it was temporary. Said a missing boy brought searchers. A dead boy eventually made them stop looking. Jack stood abruptly. The chair scraped across the floor. Ethan turned. Jack walked to the fireplace. His good hand closed around the stone mantle. Temporary. Word came out bitter. Walter had turned his own son into a ghost because it was convenient. On the tape, Ethan continued. I fought him. Told him Jack would never believe it. A faint laugh, broken around the edges. I guess I was wrong. Jack lowered his head. At 13, he had believed Walter because fathers were supposed to know what happened, because Walter spoke with certainty, because Jack wanted certainty more than he wanted doubt. The mountain took him. 4 words. 45 years. The cassette hissed again. I wrote to you that spring. Jack turned slowly. I gave Dad the letter. A long silence followed on the recording. He came back 2 weeks later and said you didn't want to hear from me. Jack stared at that recorder. No. Ethan's voice remained calm. He said you were angry, said Mom had gotten worse, said if I cared about either of you, I'd leave you alone until he fixed things. No. Jack crossed the room and stopped over the machine. That's a lie. Titan came toward him. Jack barely noticed. Ethan continued. I believed that too. Jack's breath shortened. I wrote again in August. Another one at Christmas. One on your birthday. Jack remembered that birthday. 14 years old. His mother had made a cake no one ate. Walter had taken him outside afterward and taught him how to change a tractor belt because, as Walter put it, keeping busy was better than feeling sorry for yourself. Jack had admired him for that. The memory turned rotten in real time. Ethan's voice lowered. Years later, Dad admitted he never gave you any of them. Jack closed his eyes. The room disappeared for a moment. Not into Afghanistan this time. Into childhood. Walter at the kitchen table. Walter teaching him to shoot. Walter shaking his hand when Jack joined the Navy. Walter sitting in the front row when Jack returned from deployment. All those years, all those opportunities, and not once. Your brother is alive. Jack's anger arrived so hard that his first instinct was movement. Strike something. Throw the recorder, break the chair. Instead, he stood still. That was harder. Tan pressed his body against Jack's leg. Jack looked down. The dog had left the door, not because the danger outside was gone, because Jack was becoming the danger inside. Jack slowly lowered himself into the chair. Iden placed his head beneath Jack's injured hand. The pressure hurt. That helped. Jack breathed. Once. Twice. His fingers loosened. Good boy. Ethan's recorded voice filled the silence. I hated Dad for a long time. Jack looked at the machine. Maybe you will too. A breath. But if you've made it this far, Jack, don't stop at him. Jack's attention sharpened. Gordon controlled more than the company. He controlled contracts, loans, county jobs. Men who worked for Pike had brothers in the sheriff's office, cousins at the bank, families on ranches that couldn't survive if the company pulled out. The tape crackled. When I threatened to take the water tests to the state, Gordon didn't threaten me first. Jack leaned closer. He threatened everybody else. That landed differently. Not forgiveness for Walter, but context. The cowardice had been wrapped in fear for an entire town. Ethan continued. Dad thought he could contain one lie. A pause. But lies don't stay the size you make them. Jack looked at Walter's note lying beside the map. Your brother did not die where I told you he did. Too little. Too late. Ethan's voice grew more distant. By 1983, I knew Dad wasn't fixing anything. He was protecting the same system that trapped us. Jack picked up the notebook again. A folded sheet was tucked into the back cover. He had missed it earlier. He unfolded it. Her names, dates, mailing addresses. At the top, Ethan had written, letters Dad took. Jack read the dates. Jack's stomach tightened. Ethan had kept trying. Walter had kept stopping him. Titan's nose touched Jack's wrist. Jack whispered, he didn't leave me. The sentence was barely audible. For 45 years, a part of Jack had carried resentment he never admitted. Not only grief, abandonment. Ethan had walked into a storm after an argument and never returned. Jack had wondered in quiet moments whether his brother simply wanted a life without them. Without him. Now that wound changed shape. Ethan had tried to come back with words, and Walter had closed the door every time. The anger returned, but now sorrow was inside it. The cassette reached another section. Ethan sounded older. The recording might have been made years after his disappearance. Gordon came here more than once. Jack glanced at the 1988 photograph. He likes to pretend we're negotiating. A humorless breath. We're not, then. If you find the picture of us, don't misunderstand it. I made him think I was tired. Made him think I might trade the negatives for a way out. Jack picked up the photograph. So that was why they stood together. Not friendship, a staged negotiation. Evidence of proximity, Ethan continued. I needed him to believe the important material was still in the hut. Jack's eyes narrowed. Still in the hut, meaning some of it was somewhere else. There's more below. Static swallowed several words. Jack leaned closer. Ethan. Ridiculous. But the name escaped anyway. The voice returned. If Pike reaches the lower room before you do, everything Dad sacrificed us for becomes permanent. Then came the sound Jack had already heard. A faint knock on the old recording. Ethan stopped talking. His breathing changed. Someone's outside. A second sound. Closer. Ethan whispered, Pike found the hut. The recording ended. This time Jack let the tape run. There were 5 seconds of empty hiss, then a violent scrape, a door opening. A man's voice too distorted to understand. Something struck the recorder. The tape went silent. Jack stared at it. No explanation of what happened next. Only a severed moment from 1988. Titan's head snapped toward the real door. Jack heard it too, crunch not imagined. Not the building settling, a boot in snow. Then another, slow, heavy, deliberate. The steps approached from the side of the hut. Jack switched off the cassette. The fire suddenly seemed too bright. Titan moved into position between Jack and the entrance. Jack did not call him back. A shadow crossed the frosted window. One person, Then another shape moved behind it, at least two. Jack's pulse settled into the cold rhythm he remembered from operations. Fear did not disappear, it became information. He slipped Ethan's notebook, the cassette, and the water records into his pack. Titan gave a low growl. The footsteps stopped directly outside. Jack looked at the old photograph one last time. Ethan beside Gordon Pike, then toward the door. 45 years ago, his brother's recording had ended with Pike reaching this hut. Now someone had followed Jack to the same place. The latch moved, slowly, and Jack Callahan realized that whatever Walter had buried on Blackstone Ridge had never truly stayed in the past. The latch lifted another inch. Titan's body lowered. Jack raised one hand. Hold. The dog froze, but every muscle beneath his coat remained tight. Jack moved to the side of the door instead of standing in front of it. The old SEAL instincts came without invitation. Angles, distance, hands, exits. He had no intention of turning a stone hut into a battlefield, but he had survived too long by refusing to pretend danger was harmless. The door opened. Wind exploded into the room. Snow spun across the floor. A man stepped through wearing a dark winter coat, insulated gloves, and expensive boots powdered white to the knee. Jack knew the face, not personally, but Pine Hollow was small enough that everyone knew the Pike family. Cole Pike, 44, Gordon Pike's only son, the man who now controlled Pike land and mineral holdings from a glass office overlooking the same valley his father's company had once depended on. Cole stopped when he saw Jack. For half a second, neither man spoke. Then Cole smiled. It was a polite smile. That made Jack trust it even less. Jack Callahan. Jack stayed where he was. Cole. Titan growled softly. Cole's eyes dropped toward the dog. Still keeping military company, I see. You didn't hike through a blizzard to talk about my dog. No. Two more men appeared behind Cole. One remained outside near the wall. The other stepped inside. Broad shoulders, gray knit cap, heavy beard. Jack's attention went immediately to his boots. Deep lug winter soles, angular heel pattern, the same pattern Jack had seen in the fresh print beyond the sabotaged bridge. Jack's expression did not change, but something inside him locked into place. Cole pulled the door shut. The sudden quiet felt worse than the storm. We were checking livestock farther south, Cole said. Saw smoke. Jack looked at him. Your cattle climb 6,000 feet in blizzards now. The bearded man shifted. Cole did not. We have range leases all over this country. Not here. Cole's smile faded slightly. Jack continued. According to the county, nothing is here. That landed. Cole's eyes moved toward the open fireplace cavity, then toward Jack's pack, just once, but Jack saw it. So did Titan. The dog stepped closer to Jack. Cole exhaled. I was hoping we could do this without pretending. Good. Jack nodded toward the cavity. Start. Cole removed his gloves one finger at a time. My father told me stories about this ridge when I was young. Gordon tell you about Ethan too? For the first time, Cole's control slipped, only slightly, a tightening around the eyes, then it was gone. So you found the photograph, and more. Cole looked at the table. The micro-cassette recorder was still there. Jack had packed the tape, but left the machine. Cole saw it. His jaw shifted. Jack said, Your livestock story isn't getting better. Cole walked toward the fire. Titan immediately moved between them. Cole stopped. Jack did not call the dog away. That's close enough. Cole looked down at Titan. I heard what that animal did overseas. Jack's voice cooled. You heard stories. Same thing in Pine Hollow. No, it isn't. The wind struck the outer wall. Cole turned toward the flames. My father is 77 years old. Jack said nothing. He hasn't run Pike Western in decades. That's supposed to matter. It should. Cole faced him. Whatever you found here happened before either of us had any say in it. My brother had a say. Silence. Cole's face hardened. There it was. Recognition without admission. Jack stepped slightly closer. You knew Ethan was alive. Cole answered carefully. I know what my father told me. Then tell me that Ethan became obsessed with destroying a company that fed half this valley. Jack almost laughed. That's the family version? There were hundreds of jobs connected to Pike Western. Trucking, equipment, ranch leases, contractors. Families who would have lost everything. So they poisoned water instead. The bearded man looked toward Cole. Cole's tone tightened. No one is saying mistakes weren't made. Mistakes, Jack felt anger rise. He controlled it. Somebody cut through that bridge. Neither man answered. Jack looked directly at the bearded one. Same boots. The man's eyes dropped instinctively. 1 second. Enough. Cole sighed. Jack, did he cut it? Cole's voice remained calm. That bridge has been unsafe for years. That wasn't my question. Another silence. Titan's ears angled toward the third man still outside. Jack heard movement along the wall. They were positioning themselves, not talking, positioning. His pulse slowed. Cole seemed to notice the change in Jack. You don't need to make this harder than it is. I haven't made anything yet. Cole reached slowly inside his coat. Titan surged half a step. Easy, Jack said. Cole stopped, then removed an envelope, thick, white. He placed it on the table. Jack did not touch it. What is that? An opportunity to end this before it becomes ugly. Bit late for that. Cole opened the envelope. Inside was a typed agreement. Jack saw numbers near the bottom. $2,000, $1,000. He looked up. Cole spoke quietly. $2 million. Jack said nothing. You give me the notebook, any film you found, the water records, the cassette, and Walter's map, and then you go back to your ranch. What happens to this place? Nothing. What happens to what Ethan found? Cole's eyes held his. It stays where it belongs. Jack looked around the stone hut. Buried. Finished. There's a difference. Not to the people who'd lose their homes. Cole walked closer to the table. Think about Pine Hollow, Jack. Not 1981, today. You drag this into public view, newspapers show up. State investigators show up. Lawsuits follow. Land values collapse. Every unexplained illness becomes a headline. People panic over wells they've been drinking from for 40 years. If the water is safe, testing proves it. And if it isn't? The question hung between them. Jack studied him. Cole realized too late what he had admitted. Jack said, So you don't know? Cole's mouth tightened. That's not what I said. No. It's what you were afraid to say. The bearded man shifted closer. Tan turned his head. The man stopped. Cole lowered his voice. Take the money. Jack looked at the agreement again. $2 million. A number chosen because it sounded large enough to turn principle into arithmetic. Why so much? Because your father's name is in those files too. Jack's gaze lifted. Cole continued. If this comes out, Walter doesn't become the respected man Pine Hollow buried last week. He becomes the county official who signed permits and helped cover contamination. Jack felt the words hit. Cole saw it. He pressed harder. Your mother is dead. Walter is dead. Whatever Ethan became, he's been gone for decades. Who are you protecting by reopening this? Jack's voice was low. the truth. Cole shook his head. Truth doesn't repair people, no. Jack thought of the dog tag against his chest. It just stops the lie. Cole stared at him. The warmth vanished from his expression. Your father understood something you apparently don't. Jack's eyes narrowed. What's that? Sometimes protecting people means carrying things they never need to know. That sentence sounded too much like Walter. Jack hated him for it. Cole tapped the agreement. $2 million. No court, no press, no family name dragged through mud. You can repair your ranch, retire comfortably, take care of that dog for whatever years he has left. Titan's eyes remained fixed on Cole. Jack slowly picked up the agreement. Cole relaxed by a fraction. Jack tore it once, then again. He dropped the pieces into the fireplace. Flame curled around the paper. Cole watched $2 million turn black at the edges. Jack said, Titan's already got what he needs. Cole's jaw clenched, and so do I. The man near the door took a step. Jack looked at him. Don't. In Jack's voice stopped him. Cole stared into the fire. When he spoke again, the businessman's tone was gone. What did Ethan leave? Jack said nothing. Jack, enough. Cole's eyes moved toward the floor, not randomly, toward the stones near the back wall, Jack noticed. So did Titan. Cole knew about something beneath the hut, the lower room. Jack thought of Ethan's warning. Don't let Pike reach the lower room first, Jack said. You're afraid I haven't found the important part yet. Cole looked back at him. Too quickly. That was answer enough. The storm hammered the roof. Cole took one slow breath. No rescue team is coming up Blackstone tonight. Jack remained still. No road crews either. Cole nodded toward the window. That weather will cover tracks before morning. The bearded man's face went expressionless. Jack felt no panic, only certainty. The bridge had not been sabotage meant to frighten him. It had been preparation. Cole stepped closer. Give me the pack. Titan showed his teeth. Jack whispered, Stay. Titan remained beside him. Cole's voice dropped. People die in storms, Jack. Jack stared at him. Laz added, especially people who insist on going places everyone warned them not to go. The meaning could not have been clearer. Jack's thoughts accelerated. 3 men, 1 door, bad shoulder, blizzard outside, unknown lower room. Titan, the old Jack, the operator, began arranging the hut in his head. Distance from table to door, firewood stack, window too small, fireplace cavity too narrow, no visible secondary exit. If he fought here, Titan would fight too. That was exactly what Jack wanted to avoid. He needed another option. Titan suddenly turned away from Cole. Jack almost corrected him. Then he saw the dog move toward the rear of the hut. Titan lowered his nose, sniffed, scratched once at the stone floor. Cole's eyes widened. Titan. Warning came too late. The Malinois clawed again. A metallic ring struck stone beneath his paw. Cole moved. There. Jack stepped into his path. The 2 men behind Cole surged forward. Titan scratched a third time. A flat iron loop appeared from beneath years of dust at the edge of a floor slab. Cole stared at it. For the first time since entering the hut, genuine fear appeared on his face. Not fear of Jack, fear of what was underneath them. Jack saw it and understood. The lower room was real, and Cole Pike had just confirmed that whatever Ethan had hidden below Blackstone Ridge was worth far more to his family than $2 million. Titan hooked his paw beneath the ring. Jack looked at the 3 men, then at the floor. Good boy. Cole stepped forward. Don't open that. Jack wrapped his hand around the iron ring and pulled. The stone slab lifted less than an inch before its weight fought back. Cole lunged. Jack shifted his body between him and the opening. Titan moved faster. A sharp bark cracked through the hut, and the Malinois drove forward just enough to stop Cole without making contact. Cole froze. "Call him off." Jack kept one hand on the ring. "Back up." The two hired men spread slightly. Jack saw the decision forming before either of them moved. He pulled harder. The slab rose another 6 inches. Cold, black air breathed up from beneath the floor. Not a room, a shaft. A narrow wooden ladder disappeared into darkness. Titan immediately turned toward it. Cole's face changed. "Jack, don't." Jack looked at him. "So this is what you came for. You don't know what's down there. Neither do you." Cole's eyes flicked toward the opening. Jack saw the lie. Cole knew enough. That was all Jack needed. He kicked a nearby chair sideways. It struck the bearded man's knees and bought Jack 2 seconds. Go Titan dropped into the opening. Jack followed. His injured shoulder screamed when he grabbed the ladder, but he forced his weight onto his left arm and descended. Above him, Cole shouted. The stone slab scraped. Jack reached the bottom and found Titan waiting in a tunnel barely high enough to stand in. "Move!" They ran. The tunnel had been cut partly through earth and partly through rock. Old timber braces lined the ceiling. Rusted conduit followed one wall. Behind them came boots on the ladder. Cole had followed. Jack did not look back. The passage turned sharply, then split. Titan hesitated for less than a second before taking the left branch. Jack trusted him. The right tunnel smelled of damp earth. The left carried something else. Cold air, wood smoke, human scent. Fresh. They moved faster. The pain in Jack's shoulder had become a constant burn. Every few steps, the tunnel narrowed enough that he had to turn sideways. Titan slipped through easily until a rusted metal bracket protruded from a collapsed support. The dog jumped. His rear paw caught. Titan yelped. Jack stopped immediately. "Titan!" The Malinois landed awkwardly, then lifted his front left paw. Blood darkened the fur near the pad. Jack crouched. "Easy." Titan tried to pull forward. "No." Jack took the paw gently. A shallow cut crossed the outer pad, not catastrophic, but deep enough to hurt. Jack wrapped it quickly with gauze from his pocket kit. Titan's eyes never left the tunnel ahead. "You can stop." Titan pulled his paw free and stood. Jack almost smiled despite everything. "Of course you won't," a voice echoed faintly behind them. "Cole." Jack, farther back, still coming. Jack rose. "Then let's finish it." Titan moved ahead with a slight limp. The tunnel climbed gradually. Old construction changed around them. Stone gave way to rough-cut timber, then corrugated metal. Jack recognized it. Industrial. A service tunnel. Pike Western. The hidden passage had connected the hut to some larger facility. A faint yellow glow appeared ahead. Titan slowed. His nose lifted. He stopped, then gave a quiet sound Jack had never heard from him before. Not warning, not fear. Recognition of a living presence. Jack reached the tunnel exit. A warped metal door stood half open. Beyond it was a room, no A station, an abandoned mineral survey building buried beneath years of fallen timber and snow. One wall had collapsed inward long ago and been reinforced from inside. A wood stove burned near the center. Shelves held canned food, medicine, tools, fresh water, a narrow cot, a battery-powered lamp. Someone lived here, now. Jack stepped inside. The room smelled of smoke, old paper, wool, and a human being who had been here minutes earlier. Titan moved past him. The dog ignored everything and went straight toward a wall covered in newspaper clippings. Jack followed. His heart began to pound. Pine Hollow Marine returns home. No, not Marine. The clipping was older and yellowed. Local man joins Navy. Another Wyoming native earns SEAL Trident. Jack stared. His own face looked back at him from decades of photographs, graduation, deployment. A grainy newspaper picture of Jack shaking hands with Walter. Then newer clippings, a charity run, a veterans event, a small article about Jack taking over his mother's cattle ranch. Someone had followed his life. For years, Jack touched one clipping. His hand trembled. Titan limped toward a table beneath the wall. There was a photograph there. Jack at 19, another at 37, another much more recent. Taken from a distance outside the Copper Lantern Diner. Jack turned sharply. A floorboard creaked behind him, and spun. A man stood in the far doorway, old, thin, gray beard, a heavy wool shirt beneath a weathered coat. He held a hunting rifle pointed toward the floor, not at Jack. The man's face was lined deeply by age, but his eyes were clear, familiar, painfully familiar. Jack's body stopped responding. The old man looked at him for several seconds. Then his gaze dropped to Titan's wrapped paw. "Still picking the hard road, I see." Jack said nothing. The man's voice roughened. "You always did." Jack's throat tightened. He knew that voice, not from the cassette, from something older. Summer evenings, a barn loft, a 17-year-old boy laughing at him. Impossible. The man smiled faintly. "You still tilt your head when you're angry," Jack's breath caught. "You did that when you were 13. The room seemed to lose all sound." Jack stared. The scar through the left eyebrow. Older now, whiter. But there, the same crooked line from a fall off the hayloft. Jack whispered one word, "Ethan." The old man's eyes filled. "Hey, little brother." Jack did not move. Titan looked between them. 45 years vanished and remained at the same time. Jack saw the teenager he remembered inside the man standing before him. But age had changed everything else. The shoulders had narrowed, hair had gone silver, hands were rough and marked. His brother had become an old man without Jack witnessing a single year of it. Jack took one step, stopped. Anger arrived with joy. Joy collided with grief. Grief became disbelief. He could not finish. Ethan set the rifle against the wall. Jack's voice broke. "You're alive." Ethan nodded. Jack laughed once, a short, damaged sound. Then he crossed the room. The brothers stopped an arm's length apart. Neither seemed to know whether to shake hands, embrace, or strike the other. Jack chose none of them. He stared. 45 years, Ethan lowered his eyes. "I know. You know?" Jack's voice rose. "You know?" Titan moved between them, not blocking, bridging. Ethan looked at the dog. "That's Titan?" Jack froze. "How do you know his name?" Ethan glanced toward the newspaper wall. "I know more about your life than you think." Jack looked at the photographs again. A different pain entered him. "You watched me. I tried to, and you never came home." Ethan's face tightened. "Jack, you were alive. Yes, Mom died believing you were dead." Ethan closed his eyes. Jack stepped closer. "Dad lied to me. Pike chased you. Fine, I understand that part." His breathing had begun to shorten. Titan pressed against Jack's knee. Jack barely noticed. "But 45 years?" Ethan looked at him. There was no defense in his expression, only exhaustion, because after Dad stopped lying, he paused. The tunnel behind Jack echoed with distant movement. Cole was still coming. Ethan looked toward the sound, then back at Jack. "Pike made sure I couldn't." Jack's anger paused. "What does that mean?" Ethan moved quickly toward the wood stove and pulled a metal case from beneath the floorboards. "Not here." Jack grabbed his arm. No, Ethan stopped. You're not disappearing again. The words landed between them harder than anything else. Ethan slowly looked down at Jack's hand. Then up. I'm not. Titan suddenly growled toward the tunnel. Both brothers turned. A muffled voice echoed. Closer now, Hull. Ethan's expression hardened. He found the station. Jack released his arm. Then tell me why he's still hunting something from 1981. Ethan opened the metal case. Inside were folders, photographs, a sealed ledger. Jack saw Gordon Pike's name written across several tabs. Ethan said, because what you found in the hut was only enough to prove what happened. He lifted the ledger. This proves who ordered it. Jack stared. Ethan closed the case, and Gordon has spent 45 years making sure it never leaves Blackstone Ridge. Titan limped toward the door, placing himself between the brothers and the approaching footsteps. Jack looked at his brother, alive, real. Standing 3 feet away, after almost half a century, every question Jack had carried onto the mountain had just been replaced by one larger than all of them. He stepped closer. Why didn't you come home? Ethan met his eyes. For several seconds, the old man said nothing. Then, quietly, because after Dad stopped lying, Pike made sure I couldn't. A boot struck metal in the tunnel. Cole was almost there. Ethan grabbed the case. Jack moved beside Titan. For the first time since Jack was 13, the Callahan brothers stood on the same side of a danger. But before they could survive what was coming through that tunnel, Jack still needed to learn the hardest truth of all. Whether Ethan had been kept away for 45 years, or whether, somewhere along the way, he had chosen to stay gone. The answer stood 3 feet in front of Jack, older, thinner, alive, and carrying a metal case that had somehow become more important than the 45 missing years between them. From the tunnel came another metallic scrape. Cole was close. Ethan moved toward a narrow side door at the back of the survey station. There's another room. Jack followed. Titan limped beside him, favoring the bandaged paw but refusing to slow. The room beyond was no larger than a pantry, concrete walls, one narrow vent. A workbench covered with old maps, batteries, tools, and stacks of paper protected inside plastic sleeves. Ethan shut the door behind them. The sounds from the tunnel became muffled. For the first time since Jack had seen his brother's face, they had a few seconds where nobody was moving. Nobody was running. Nobody was trying to kill the truth before it could leave the mountain. Jack looked at Ethan, now. Ethan set the metal case on the bench. Jack, 45 years. His voice was quiet. That frightened Ethan more than shouting would have. Jack stepped closer. I need the whole answer. Titan lowered himself between them. The dog did not lie down completely. He stayed upright on his chest, head raised, watching both brothers. Ethan looked toward the floor. Dad came back. Jack said nothing. Not once. A lot. When? At first, every few days, Ethan rubbed one hand over his face. He brought food, fuel, news from home. Jack's jaw hardened. And lies. The word came without defense. Ethan continued. He kept saying he needed more time. He thought he could make Gordon destroy the records, move the contaminated material, close the operation quietly. He thought hiding you was part of that. He thought hiding me kept everybody calm. Jack laughed once. There was no humor in it. Mom spent 15 years waiting for a body. Ethan flinched. I know. No, you don't. Ethan looked up. I watched from far away. Jack went still. What? I watched the ranch when I could. The words landed badly. Jack stepped closer. You watched? Sometimes. You watched her grieve. Ethan's face tightened. I wasn't proud of it. You watched me grow up? From a distance. You saw me leave for the Navy. Jack's breathing changed. Titan immediately raised his head. You saw me come home? Ethan nodded. Jack turned away. The room felt too small. Years began arriving in fragments. Boot camp, training, the first deployment. His mother's funeral. Walter standing beside him at the graveside. And somewhere, according to Ethan, another pair of eyes had been watching from the edge of Jack's life. Jack turned back. Why? Ethan's voice broke slightly, because at first Gordon's men were still looking. At first, yes, not 45 years. Ethan closed his eyes. There it was, the part Jack had feared. The answer no villain could carry for him. Ethan opened his eyes again. No. Silence. Titan's ears shifted toward distant movement outside the door. Ethan kept talking. By the late 80s, Gordon wasn't sending men up here every week anymore. Jack said nothing. By the 90s, I could have gone farther. Home, maybe. Did you? No. Jack stared at him. Why? Ethan struggled with the answer, not because he didn't know, because he did. Jack's expression hardened. That's not enough. It became enough. Ethan leaned both hands on the workbench. You disappear for a week because you're afraid. Then a month. Then a year. He looked at Jack. After a while, you aren't hiding from the thing that scared you anymore. His voice dropped. You're hiding from what you've become. Jack felt the sentence before he understood why. Ethan continued. I kept telling myself I'd come home when I had enough evidence. Then when Dad told the truth. Then when Gordon lost control of the company, he gave a tired shake of the head. Every time one reason disappeared, I found another. Jack looked at Titan. The dog had gone still. Ethan said, You know something about that. Jack's eyes snapped back to him. Don't. You came home from war. I said don't. But part of you didn't. Jack stepped forward. Anger came fast. Don't compare this to my service. I'm not. You don't know what happened there. I know what hiding looks like. Jack's hands tightened. For a moment, Ethan looked almost frightened. Not of violence, of losing him again. Jack spoke through clenched teeth. I spent 20 years learning how to walk into bad places because other people needed somebody to go, I know. You spent 45 learning how not to walk home. Ethan absorbed it, did not argue. Yes, that answer took some of the fire out of Jack. Not enough to forgive, enough to listen. Ethan opened the metal case. Inside were folders organized by year. Jack stared. You kept collecting. Whenever Pike moved land. Whenever somebody sold a contaminated parcel. Whenever old records surfaced. Ethan lifted a survey map. Red lines tracked underground drainage far beyond the original lease. They never cleaned all of it. Jack looked closer. Several drainage lines reached toward ranch properties south of Pine Hollow. His stomach tightened. How bad? I don't know anymore. You don't know? Levels changed. Some wells were shut down quietly. Others were never tested again. Jack thought of Rachel. The missing environmental file. The emergency groundwater closure. Cole's $2 million offer. Ethan tapped one section of the map. This is why Gordon kept me away. Jack frowned. Because you had records? Because I kept finding new ones. He removed another document, a signed memorandum, Gordon Pike's name at the bottom. Walter Callahan's initials appeared beside one paragraph. Jack stared. Ethan noticed. Dad didn't sign the dumping order. What did he sign? A temporary closure. Jack looked up. What? Ethan nodded. That's the part you don't know. Ethan pulled out another file. By 1986, Dad had changed. Jack gave him a cold look. Convenient. I'm not asking you to forgive him. Good, but he did come back here and tell me he was done protecting Gordon. Jack said nothing. He brought copies of county records. He wanted me to go home. Jack's expression changed. When, March of 1987, a year before the photograph, Jack looked towards her other room. Then why were you still here in 1988? Because I didn't trust him. That answer hurt in a different way, Ethan continued. I thought he was trying to get me off the mountain so Gordon could find the rest. Jack looked at the floor. Was he? No. The word came softly. I learned that too late. Ethan pulled out a letter. Old, folded. Walter's handwriting. Jack did not touch it. He wrote me after I refused to come back. Ethan's voice roughened. He said he had told Gordon their arrangement was over. What happened? Gordon threatened you. Jack looked up. Me and Mom. Ethan nodded. He knew where you were training. He knew when you came home. He knew where she shopped. Jack felt something turn cold inside him. Did Dad tell the sheriff? Gordon had people everywhere. So Dad backed down again, for a while. Ethan paused. Then he started moving records out of county storage. Jack thought of the false wall in Walter's study. The map, the note, the ammo box, not a random collection, a last archive. He was trying to undo it. Ethan nodded. Slowly, Jack looked away. Walter had begun the lie, then spent years trapped inside it. Just like Ethan, just like Jack had spent years pretending certain noises did not still pull him back into mountains on the other side of the world, Jack hated the similarity. Titan shifted, his injured paw trembled. Jack noticed. He crouched immediately. Easy, buddy. The bandage had darkened. Titan tried to pull the paw away. Jack held it gently. No, let me look. Ethan watched. Something in his expression softened. Jack checked the wound. Still manageable, but Titan needed real treatment soon. Jack tightened the wrap. You've done enough. Titan licked Jack's wrist. Jack rested his forehead against the dog's head for a few seconds. His anger had somewhere to go that was not Ethan. Ethan said quietly, He kept you alive. Jack looked up. More than once. I know. There it was again. You keep saying that. Ethan lowered his eyes. I followed everything I could. Jack stood. Newspaper clippings aren't a relationship. No. A photograph from across the street isn't a brother. No. You don't get credit for watching. I know. Jack almost wanted Ethan to fight back. It would have been easier. Instead, Ethan accepted every blow. That made the grief heavier. The sounds from the tunnel stopped. Both men noticed. Titan stood despite the pain. Ethan's voice dropped. They're listening. Jack looked toward the door. How many ways in? 2. Out? 1 good one. Jack studied the room. We may need it. Ethan reached deeper into the case. Not without this. He removed a thick leather ledger wrapped in oilcloth. The book looked older than the others. Jack's eyes narrowed. What is it? The piece Gordon couldn't explain away. Ethan opened it. Handwritten shipment numbers, dates, chemical quantities, disposal locations, payments, then signatures. Gordon Pike. Again. Jack scanned one page. These are original? Yes. How'd you get it? The site accountant gave it to me before he left Wyoming. Still alive. Died in 1994, Jack understood. One witness gone. Another gone. Records disappearing. A secret surviving because one frightened man stayed on a mountain longer than anyone imagined. Ethan closed the ledger. This connects Gordon personally to the dumping. Jack looked at him. Does Cole know? He knows enough to be terrified of it. Jack thought of Cole's face when Titan uncovered the floor ring. Yes, he knew. Ethan slid the ledger into the case. Rachel can authenticate the county pieces. State labs can compare the old samples. Jack nodded. Then this leaves the mountain. For the first time, Ethan looked almost relieved. Then a sound came through the wall, a metal door opening, not the tunnel entrance. Close it, Titan growled. Ethan's face changed. They found the second access. Jack looked at him. You said one good way out. It won't stay good long. Heavy footsteps entered the outer station. Cole's voice carried through the wall. Ethan? Jack froze. Cole knew exactly who was here. Ethan closed his eyes. Jack stared at him. How long has he known? Ethan answered quietly. Long enough. Cole called again. There's nowhere left to hide. Jack looked at the ledger, then at Titan, then at the brother he had just found. 45 years of anger still stood between them. But something had changed. Jack no longer saw a ghost. He saw a frightened old man who had survived long enough to become imprisoned by survival itself. Jack picked up the metal case. Ethan looked at him. What are you doing, getting us out? Jack, you want another 45 years to think about it? For the first time, Ethan almost smiled. No. Good. Nangua moved between them, limping but ready. Jack glanced down. The same dog who had dragged him out of memories all the way up the mountain was now standing between two brothers who had spent most of their lives hiding from different kinds of fear. Jack opened the side door. Before stepping through, Ethan caught his sleeve. Jack. Jack looked back. I'm sorry. The words were too small for 45 years. Jack knew that. So did Ethan. Jack did not say he forgave him. Not yet. He only nodded toward the corridor. Stay close. For now, that was enough. Then Ethan stopped. His eyes shifted toward the outer station. Something was wrong. Jack heard it a second later, a metal clasp snapping open. Cole had found the case Jack thought was still hidden beneath the main table, but the case was in Jack's hand, which meant Cole had opened something else. Ethan went pale. The duplicate storage box. What was in it? Ethan's gaze moved to the ledger Jack carried. Nothing that matters anymore. A beat. Then his expression changed. No. He crossed toward the doorway. Jack grabbed him. What? The original ledger wasn't the only signed record. A crash sounded outside. Cole shouted to one of his men. Ethan looked at Jack. There's one final contamination ledger in the main archive cabinet. Jack's grip tightened. The signed original? Ethan nodded. The one Gordon Pike can never deny. Another crash, then silence. Ethan's face fell. Too late. Cole's voice came from the next room. Calm, satisfied. I found it. Jack looked at Titan. The dog's ears rose. The 45-year-old truth had survived storms, lies, fear, and an entire generation of silence. Now it was in the hands of the one man who had come to Blackstone Ridge to make sure it never survived another night. Jack moved first. He stepped through the side doorway with Titan tight against his leg and Ethan behind him. The main survey room had changed in seconds. One cabinet hung open. Files covered the floor. Cole stood near the far exit, holding a thick leather ledger against his chest. The bearded man was beside him. The third man remained near the tunnel entrance. Nobody spoke. Jack looked at the book, then at Cole. Put it down. Cole smiled without humor. You really don't know when to stop. Jack shifted slightly, enough to keep his body between Titan and the nearest man. Ethan stepped into view. Cole looked at him. For the first time, his confidence slipped. So it's true. Ethan's face hardened. You look like your father. Cole's expression changed. Don't. Same eyes. I said don't. Ethan took another step. Gordon always hated being reminded that fear had a face. Cole's grip tightened around the ledger. Jack saw it. Not anger alone. Shame. Inheritance. Cole was carrying more than a book. He was carrying the weight of everything his father had taught him to protect. Jack said, "This ends here." Cole shook his head. "No, this ends when nobody can prove any of it." He turned toward the outer door. Jack moved. The bearded man stepped into his path. Titan growled. Jack stopped him with one word. "Stay." Titan froze. The bearded man watched the dog more than Jack. That was his mistake. Jack shifted left, forcing the man to adjust. Then Jack drove his shoulder into the man's center of balance and sent him hard into the edge of the table. No flourish, no anger, just enough to clear the path. Cole ran. The outer door slammed open. White light exploded into the station. Wind followed. Jack went after him. "Ethan, stay inside!" Ethan shouted something back, but the storm swallowed it. Outside, snow had eased enough to see 50 yards. Cole was already crossing the old service road above the ravine. The ledger was tucked beneath his coat. Jack ran after him. His shoulder screamed with every step. Behind him came the scrape of Titan's claws. Jack turned. Titan was following. No. The dog kept coming. "Ton, stay!" The command stopped him. Instantly, Titan stood in the snow, injured paw raised. Jack hated the relief he felt. "Stay there." Then he turned and ran. Cole reached the bend where the old service road narrowed above Blackstone Creek. Snow had packed hard against the slope. Ice glittered beneath it. Jack could hear Cole breathing now. "Stop!" Cole looked back. That glance cost him footing. He slipped, recovered, and kept moving. Jack gained ground. Then the bearded man burst from the station behind them. Titan barked. Jack looked over his shoulder. The man was headed toward Ethan. Titan saw it too. His entire body changed. Jack shouted, "Stay!" Titan obeyed. One heartbeat. Two. The bearded man reached the doorway and raised one arm toward Ethan. Titan broke command. He launched forward, not blindly, not at the man's throat, at his balance. The Malinois struck the side of his leg and shoulder, forcing him sideways into the snow. The man's arm swung down. A metal flashlight or short baton glanced across Titan's ribs. Titan yelped. Jack's chest seized. "Titan!" The dog staggered, then stood. The man tried to rise. Titan blocked him with a low growl, body between the attacker and Ethan. Ethan grabbed the man's dropped radio and kicked it out of reach. Jack turned back toward Cole. The ledger. He had to finish this. Cole had reached the frozen crossing where the service road narrowed beside a steep drop. Below, Blackstone Creek moved beneath broken sheets of ice. Jack slowed. "Don't go farther." Cole turned. His face was pale from cold and effort. "You think I wanted any of this?" Jack did not answer. Cole laughed once. "My father built everything I have. He built it on poisoned water. He built Pine Hollow. He bought silence." Cole looked toward the ledger under his coat. "You have no idea what happens if this gets out." Jack stepped closer. "I know exactly what happens. Families lose land, maybe. People lose businesses, maybe. My father dies with his name destroyed." Jack's voice stayed calm. "That's not the same as dying." Cole stared at him. The wind moved snow between them. Jack continued. "Ethan lost 45 years. My family wasn't the only one involved." "No, your father signed permits." "I know. Then burn this and we both walk away." Jack shook his head. "No." Cole's face tightened. "You'd destroy Walter too?" Jack thought of the note, the map, the lies, the late attempt at confession. Truth isn't destruction. Cole stepped backward. The ice beneath his boot cracked. Jack raised one hand. Don't. Cole looked down. Another crack spread beneath the snow. He moved sideways. The ice groaned. Jack stayed still. Then Titan appeared behind him, limping badly, breathing hard. Jack's face changed. Titan. The dog had left Ethan only after the immediate threat was contained. He looked at Cole, then at their ledger. Jack knew that look. Mission focus. No Titan stepped forward. Stay. Titan stopped. Jack pointed toward the road behind him. Back. The dog did not move. Cole laughed weakly. Even your dog knows this isn't worth dying for. Titan's ears shifted. Cole took another step toward the safer edge. Titan suddenly moved, not toward Cole directly, across the slope, fast, cutting an angle. Jack understood too late. Titan! The dog crossed in front of Cole, forcing him to stop and turn away from the stable path. Cole stumbled toward the dead end above the creek. The ice fractured louder. He froze. Titan stood 10 feet away, blocking the only easy route back, not attacking, just controlling space, acting as trained. Jack moved closer. Drop the ledger. Cole looked at Titan, then Jack, then the ice beneath him. Another line split outward. His confidence collapsed. He pulled the ledger from his coat. For one terrible second, Jack thought he might throw it into the creek. Titan growled. Cole hesitated. Jack said, "Don't make the last thing you inherit from your father another mistake." Cole's face broke. Not into tears, into exhaustion. He let the ledger fall into the snow. Jack stepped forward and picked it up. Leather. Cold. Real. 45 years, he held it against his chest. Behind him came shouting. Jack turned. The third man from the station had come outside. He was holding something dark in one hand, not pointed yet. Ethan shouted from the doorway, "Jack!" Titan saw it first. The dog spun. Jack raised his hand. "Titan, no!" Too late. Titan launched toward Jack, not the man. Jack. He slammed into Jack's leg and body just as the man raised his arm. The movement threw Jack sideways behind a drift and off the direct line. A sharp crack split the air, not loud enough to be a rifle. A flare or impact round struck the snowbank, exploding harmlessly in white powder. Titan twisted on landing. His injured paw folded beneath him. He cried out. Jack's world stopped. The ledger fell from his hand. "Tendus." The dog tried to rise, failed. Jack dropped beside him. The years disappeared. Not Blackstone, not Pike, not Ethan, just Titan, his partner, his anchor, the one living thing that had dragged Jack back from more dark places than anyone knew. Titan. The Malinois' eyes were open, breathing fast. Too fast. Jack put both hands around the dog's shoulders. "Stay with me." Titan tried to move. "No," Jack's voice cracked. "You're here." The dog looked at him. Jack pressed his forehead against Titan's. "You're with me." Those were the words Titan had given him without language for years, in aircraft, in nightmares, in mountain storms. Pressure, presence, now Jack gave them back. "Stay with me. You're here. You're with me." Titan's breathing slowed by a fraction. Jack heard movement behind him. Ethan and the others. He did not look. "Get Rachel on the radio." Ethan knelt nearby. The emergency repeater just came back online. "Call rescue." "I'm doing it." Jack kept one hand on Titan's chest. The dog blinked. Jack's throat tightened. "You don't get to leave now." Titan's tail moved once in the snow, barely, but it moved. Jack laughed through the fear. That's right. Far below the ridge, a faint mechanical thump rolled through the clearing. Then another. Jack looked up. Lights flickered between the trees. rescue vehicles climbing the lower service route. Ethan had reactivated the old emergency beacon inside the survey station. The sound grew stronger. Cole stood where Jack had left him, hands empty, face drained. The hired men had stopped moving. No one had any fight left. Jack picked up the ledger and handed it to Ethan. "Don't let go of that." Ethan held it. "I won't." Jack turned back to Titan. The dog tried to stand again. Jack stopped him. "No more missions." Titan looked offended. Even hurt, he still looked offended. Jack almost smiled. "You heard me." Rescuers appeared through the snow. Orange jackets, medical packs, lights. Rachel was with them. Jack stared. She had somehow made it up with the emergency response team. Her face changed when she saw Titan. "Oh, Jack." He did not answer. A medic knelt beside the dog. Jack refused to move away until the medic said, "He's breathing well. We need to stabilize the leg and ribs." Jack nodded once. Only then did he release Titan. As they lifted the dog onto a rescue sled, Ethan stepped beside Jack. For a moment, neither brother spoke. Then Ethan said, "There's still something Dad left for you." Jack looked at him. "What?" "Not here." Ethan glanced toward the mountain, at the hut. Jack's face tightened. A letter, another secret, another piece of Walter. Jack looked at Titan being carried toward the rescue vehicle. He had spent 45 years chasing answers. Right now, he wanted none of them. Only the dog, Ethan, seemed to understand. "It can wait," Jack nodded. "Good." Below them, emergency lights painted the snow red and gold. The storm had finally broken. The ledger was safe. Cole Pike's silence was over. Ethan was alive. But Jack felt no triumph yet. He walked beside the sled carrying Titan down the ridge, one hand resting on the dog's shoulder the entire way. For once, Titan did not lead him home. Jack led Titan, and for the first time in years, Jack Callahan understood that being strong did not always mean moving forward. Sometimes it meant staying beside the one who had never left you. 3 weeks later, the snow began to loosen its grip on Pine Hollow. It did not happen all at once. Winter in northwestern Wyoming rarely surrendered with dignity. It retreated by inches. A dark strip of earth appeared along the south fence. Blackstone Creek broke free beneath shelves of gray ice. Snow slid from barn roofs in heavy sheets, and every morning, sunlight reached a little farther across the Callahan ranch. Titan spent most of those mornings on a thick blanket beside the front window. His ribs were bruised. One paw had required stitches. A ligament in the same leg had been badly strained when he twisted during the final confrontation on Blackstone Ridge. The veterinarian had been clear. Titan would walk again. He would run some. But his working days were over. Jack had nodded when she said it, as if retirement were a simple thing to explain to a dog who had spent his entire life believing every sound might be a job. The first week home, Titan tried to follow Jack to the barn. Jack blocked the doorway. Nota Titan stared at him. Doctor's orders. The dog's ears shifted. Jack pointed toward the blanket. Titan remained exactly where he was. Jack folded his arms. "You broke one command on the mountain. Don't make it a habit." Titan finally turned around with the offended dignity of an old soldier and limped back toward the window. Jack smiled. It had taken him several days to do that without guilt. At night, he still woke sometimes hearing the crack from the ridge, seeing Titan go down, smiling that old helplessness rise. But now the memory ended differently. Titan breathing, Titan opening his eyes, Titan coming home. That mattered. So did Ethan. For 45 years, Jack had imagined 100 endings for his brother. None had included an old man sitting at Jack's kitchen table arguing about whether coffee needed to be that strong. Ethan had moved into a small cabin on the lower edge of the Callahan property for the time being, not the main house. Neither brother was ready for that much closeness. Some distances could not be erased simply because the truth had finally arrived. But every morning, Ethan walked up for breakfast. Every evening, he came back. That was enough to begin. Rachel Foster arrived on a clear Tuesday afternoon carrying 2 banker boxes and a look of exhausted satisfaction. The state confirmed the signatures. Jack set down the fence hinge he had been repairing. Gordon's and Walter's. Different documents, different roles. Ethan stepped out of the barn. Rachel nodded toward him. The contamination ledger is authentic. So are the water testing records from the hut. Jack looked toward the house. Titan was watching through the window. What happens now? Investigators are reopening the Pike Western files. Cole's interference on the mountain gave them a current case to work with, separate from whatever statutes apply to the older conduct. Jack said nothing. Rachel continued. They're testing wells across the valley. Results? Too early. That answer carried weight. Jack looked toward Pine Hollow in the distance. Families, ranches, people who had unknowingly lived beside a secret longer than some of them had been alive. What about Gordon? His attorneys are talking. Ethan gave a quiet, humorless laugh. That'll be a first. Rachel looked at him, and Walter's records changed the picture. Jack's face tightened. How? He approved permits. He helped bury what happened afterward, I know. But he also signed an emergency groundwater restriction in 1986 and quietly moved county documents out of Pike's control. Jack looked at Ethan. Ethan nodded. I told you, he tried. Jack's jaw tightened. Tried isn't the same as fixed. No. Ethan's answer was immediate. That helped. Rachel closed one of the boxes. History isn't going to give him a clean ending. Jack looked down at his hands. Good. Rachel studied him. Good? He doesn't need one. Walter had spent most of Jack's life either towering over him or haunting him. A perfect father when Jack was young, a betrayer when the truth first surfaced. Neither version was complete. Jack was beginning to understand that completeness mattered more than comfort. By late April, the lower route to Blackstone Ridge reopened. The sabotaged bridge had been removed, and county crews established a temporary crossing farther upstream. Jack waited another 2 weeks before returning. He would not go without Titan. The veterinarian objected at first. Jack promised no long hikes, no rough terrain, no work. Titan would ride most of the way. That was the agreement. On a bright May morning, Jack drove west with Titan stretched across the back seat. Ethan sat beside him. Rachel followed in another truck with Jack's daughter, Emily. Emily Callahan was 31, a school counselor in Cody, and had inherited the family habit of asking direct questions at inconvenient times. When Jack told her the truth, she had gone silent for nearly a minute. Then she asked, how much of our family was real? Jack had no answer then. He did now, all of it. The love, the fear, the damage, the lies, the attempts to repair them. Real did not mean good. It meant true. The climb toward Blackstone Ridge looked different without the blizzard. Green pushed through melting snow. The pines shone dark against an open blue sky. Water ran everywhere. What had been a white, hostile void now revealed meadows, rock shelves, distant elk tracks, and long views across the Absarokas. Titan sat upright when they reached the hut. His ears came forward. Jack opened the door. Easy. Titan jumped down carefully. The limp remained, slight but visible. He sniffed the spring air. then walked toward the stone structure. Not fast. No mission urgency, just recognition. The hut looked smaller in daylight. Jack stood outside it for a long moment. This was where Ethan had become alive again, where Walter had become a liar, where Gordon Pike's shadow had finally broken, where Titan had led Jack, when Jack could no longer lead himself. Emily walked up beside him. So this is it. Jack nodded, most of it. Inside, dust floated in shafts of sunlight. The fire was cold now. The hidden cavity beside the fireplace remained open. The floor slab above the tunnel had been secured by investigators and later released back to the family. Ethan touched the stone wall. His face changed. "You okay?" Jack asked. Ethan nodded. "Just remembering hands that aren't here anymore." Jack understood. Rachel and Emily stepped outside to give them space. Titan moved to the doorway and lay down in a square of sunlight. Ethan reached into his coat. "I've got something." Jack looked at the envelope. Old paper. Walter's handwriting. Jack did not take it immediately. "So this is what you meant on the mountain?" "Yes. How long did you have it?" "Years." Jack almost reacted. "Ethan saw it. Before you ask, Dad told me not to give it to you unless you found this place." Jack took the envelope, still controlling the timing. Apparently death didn't cure him of that. Jack looked at Ethan, then both brothers laughed, quietly, unexpectedly. It was the first time the sound had come easily. Jack opened the letter. Walter's handwriting was steadier than the final note he had found in the ammunition box. "Son, if Ethan gives you this, then I failed to tell you everything while I was alive." Jack stopped. No excuse followed. That surprised him. Walter admitted signing the road removal petition. Admitted telling the search teams to stay away from the upper ridge after convincing Ethan to hide. Admitted that he had believed silence would protect both sons. He had thought the danger would pass in weeks, then weeks became months. Every month made confession harder. Every year made it shameful. Walter wrote, "I kept telling myself I was protecting the family. The truth is, eventually I was protecting the version of myself you still respected." Jack lowered the page. That line hurt more than blame would have. He kept reading. Walter described returning to the hut in 1987, begging Ethan to come home, being refused. He described Gordon's threats, his own cowardice, his failed attempts to move records, then the final paragraph. "Fear can look like protection when you are inside it. By the time you see the cage, you may have spent years helping build it." Jack's eyes blurred. He did not wipe them. Ethan stood beside him without speaking. Walter ended with, "I cannot ask you to forgive me. I only ask that you do not let what I hid become something you hide from the people who come after you." Jack folded the letter slowly. Emily stood outside the doorway. Jack looked at her, then at Ethan, then at Titan. "No more hiding." Ethan nodded. Jack placed Walter's letter on the shelf beside Ethan's old silver dog tag. He had carried the tag to the hut specifically for this, not to return it, to leave it where the truth had finally caught up with them. Ethan looked at the tag. "You kept that all these years? Dad gave it to me after you disappeared." Ethan touched the dented edge. "I made that dent with a hammer." "I know. You laughed at me for a week. You deserved it." Ethan smiled, then his expression softened. "There's something else you should know about this place." Jack looked around. "What now?" Ethan put one hand on the stone wall. "Dad and I built it." Jack stared. "What?" "Not all of it. There was an old survey shelter here already. Mostly collapsed." Ethan looked toward the roof beams. "That first winter, Dad hauled stone up here by sled. We rebuilt the walls together." Jack said nothing. He really believed I'd be home by spring. The revelation settled slowly. Jack had thought the hut was a monument to the lie. A prison, a place Walter used to erase Ethan. But in the beginning, at least, it had been shelter. Temporary. Built by a father who still imagined he could make everything right before anyone learned what he had done. Ethan touched one of the beams. He cut that one himself. Jack looked at the wood of these years. The same roof had covered Ethan's fear, Walter's guilt, hidden evidence, Jack's survival. The structure did not become innocent because of its origin, but it became more complicated. Like Walter, like all of them, Jack let out a long breath. I don't forgive him yet, Ethan nodded. You don't have to, maybe someday, maybe, that was enough. They spent the afternoon repairing a cracked roof brace. Jack worked from a short ladder. Ethan handed him tools. Emily cleaned shelves and asked questions about the uncle she had believed was dead before she was born. Rachel cataloged the few documents investigators had returned. Titan slept in the doorway, no guarding, no scanning, no waiting for the next command, just sleeping. At one point, Ethan stood back and looked at the repaired beam. Crooked, Jack frowned. It is not. It leans. You're 65 and you lived in a hole in a mountain. You've lost perspective. Ethan laughed. There it was. Jack stopped moving. The sound reached somewhere deep, not because it was identical to the teenager he remembered. It wasn't. It was older, rougher. But the rhythm was there. For a second, Jack could almost see the red barn again. 2 boys, summer. No missing years yet. He climbed down. Outside, the late afternoon sun turned the mountains gold. Ethan stood beside Titan. The dog opened one eye. Ethan looked toward the old route descending through the trees. Funny, Jack joined him. Dad spent 45 years hiding the road. Jack watched Titan close his eyes again in the warm spring light. Titan didn't need one. Ethan smiled. This time Jack smiled too. The 45 years did not disappear. Their mother was still gone. Walter could not answer for himself. Jack and Ethan would still have angry days, silent days. Days when one memory meant something different to each of them. Truth had not repaired the past. That had never been possible. But Emily now knew the whole story. Pine Hollow would learn what had happened beneath its land. Ethan no longer had to watch his family from a distance, and Jack had finally stopped confusing endurance with healing. He looked down at Titan. The old Malinois shifted in his sleep until one paw touched Jack's boot. Jack rested his hand on Titan's head. Walter had hidden. Ethan had withdrawn. Jack had spent years fighting anything he could name and burying what he could not. Titan had done something simpler. He stayed. When Jack froze, Titan stayed. When the bridge failed, Titan stayed. When the storm erased the road, Titan stayed. When Jack found the truth and nearly lost himself inside it, Titan stayed. And when saving the evidence meant pain, Titan had still come back for him. Jack finally understood why that mattered. Survival was not the same as living. Fear could save a person for a night and imprison him for 45 years. Truth could not return what had been lost, but it could stop the loss from being inherited. The wind moved gently through the pines. No blizzard, no whiteout, no voices from another war. Only spring water running down the mountain and Ethan arguing with Emily about where the coffee should be stored. Jack stood outside the stone hut while Titan slept in the open doorway. The dog who had led him into a storm had not merely found shelter, he had found a brother. He had found the truth, and after 45 years, Titan had shown 2 men who had forgotten how to do it. the one thing he had known all along. How to stay, how to trust, and how to finally come home. If this story stayed with you, type yes in the comments if you believe the truth is worth facing, no matter how many years have passed. And if you enjoy stories about loyalty, courage, justice, and people who refuse to give up on what matters, subscribe and stay with us for the next one.